Hello. Everyone's so excited. No one's really ready for us to start. Thank you so much for joining our second annual CTSO Women's Day. We had a big debate yesterday if we were going to be oversubscribed or undersubscribed, so I'm glad to see they've actually started lining up the chairs in the back because we continue to have women come in and join. And I will say for all of you Cisco women that did not register, we know who you are. And next year we expect you to register the day that the email comes out. I know many of you, but for those of you I don't know, my name is Susan McDonough. I'm a vice president in our CTSO organization, and I run acquisition, integration, and operations, and have been leading our gender initiative for the past couple of years. I'm really excited that I'm handing the baton to Claire Markovitz. Claire, stand. Claire planned a tremendous event for today with many, many women from our organization and our extended team. So if everyone that helped with today's event could just stand really quickly, just want to thank you. It really does take an amazing group of women to put together a day like today, and I'm super excited with what we have to share with you and what you have to share with us for the next, 6-7 hours. Last year we had our first event. It was mainly CTSO women as well as our extended integration team. We had more than 100 women join. Megan Smith was our keynote speaker. She was amazing. How many of you were at last year's event? She made me tired. I was like, how does your brain hold all of that? She runs Google X, for those of you who don't know her. And then we had an afternoon session with Cindy Solomon, and the theme of last year's event was really leadership and how we build courage, presence, and influence in the workplace. When we started these sessions, we had been going as a team to PBWC and taking a group, sponsoring a few tables, and we weren't always getting out of it what we wanted, and we said, we actually think we have enough amazing women in our organization, both directly inside of Cisco and speakers we can go out to externally, that it would be fun to do our own event. So getting 100 women together to take a step back, to encourage each other, to be inspired, to be engaged, to be empowered was really an amazing event. And everyone said, let's do it again, but let's do it bigger. So we're doing it bigger. This year we have 250 women, plus women joining us from 6 locations around the country via telepresence. We have women that have come from our European team. Where's our European team? Yay! We're so happy to have you here. And we've expanded it. We not only have women from Cisco, from all of our Cisco functions, we have women who have joined us from, I think, over 20 companies joining us, as well as women that are from some of Cisco's portfolio companies. So Cisco does a lot of investing. We're happy to have some of our portfolio companies here because not enough women are in startups, and so we're excited to have you. We also have women at every stage of their career. So we have corporate powerhouses and we have early in career women. I had the pleasure, where's Gigi? There's Gigi, of doing the Executive Shadow program. Gigi was my executive shadow. She's 20-nothing, basically. Early in her career, and I was like, how's this gonna go? Shows up in my office, she opens the Gigi notebook. She has 47 questions. This was our opening intro meeting. 47 questions all about how and why. And then 8 to 10 topics she would like us to do during our one-day shadow. She's like, if I could just see all of these things, it would be a good day. And I'm like, okay. So if you don't get a chance to work with early in career women in your day-to-day work environment, I encourage you to use today to connect with them. They're awesome. They have so much energy, ask so many great questions that you go, okay, now you're tiring me too. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do it that way. Can you redesign it, Gigi, during our day together? We also have entrepreneurs here, and we have women from big corporations. So really, everyone you want to network is here today. We're going to encourage you to do that a lot. And then we said, well, we don't want to just have a random group of women. Let's invite people we mentor. Some of you invited people who mentor you. Some of you invited friends. Anyone have family here? I do. I invited my cousin. So excited. Rebecca's looking for Benny. Is Benny here? I know we have Judy and Sarah. Where are Judy and Sarah? There they are. Mother-daughter combo. I know. Again, we really want this day to be about inspiring you, engaging you, empowering you. Today's themes are really going to focus on how you can be an authentic leader and how you can be happy at work. So if you can be authentic, it's a lot easier to be happy. So those are really our themes today. We're going to focus on those. And we're going to spend a lot of time connecting. So hopefully everyone has seen our Twitter board. Padma, I confirmed you can't read it. I can't read it from here. Padma's like, I'm going to be reading tweets while I'm presenting. No. We have a CTSO Women Twitter board. We encourage you, and a lot of people have already been tweeting. On your tables, there's little questions, things you can tweet about. But anything that inspires you during the day, definitely put it out there. Also, I learned last week from my niece that when there's not just one person in the photo, it's an ussie. It's an ussie. If you're feeling particularly amazing today, just take a selfie, no problem. If you meet someone you want to take a picture with, you can post an ussie. I went last night on Urban Dictionary at 11:30 because I said, what if my niece misled me? I'm just going to confirm. And it said sort of along the lines of, yeah, it's when a couple takes a picture, we'll use it broadly. Couple takes a picture and they're so happy they're smug. And I thought, all right, I'll stick with it. So feel free to be smug in your ussie. You can post those. You can LinkedIn it. Again, use this as a chance to build connections. Padma, I'm up to 10 followers. I know. I was at 4 at the beginning of the week. Now I'm at 10. So if you want to follow me, you can figure out how to do that. I don't know how to do that, Sandrine. But we have people like, these are handles. You told me these are handles? Okay. She's shaking her. Don't shake your head, Padma. It's the best I can do. I'm impressed. We have people with handles that's their name. Like, how many Elizabeths wanted to have Elizabeth, and you're the only one that has it? What? Don't. Oh, I'm sorry. Padmasree is cooler. There's not that. Padmasree is cooler because she didn't used to work at Twitter, and she has her own handle, and 1.5 million followers. But share your handle. I am awkward just saying it because I feel like a trucker. Like, it's my handle. Connect today. Women are here to connect with you, so don't be shy. There's no need for it. You also should all have a name tag. When everyone knows Sandrine. Sandrine's awesome. She leads change management for acquisition integration and also prepares me to get my head on when I'm doing these kinds of things. And she said, well, make sure you share your word. What makes you thrive? And I thought, well, so these are how Sandrine. I said, what doesn't make me thrive is standing in front of 250 people talking on a stage. That doesn't make me thrive. The second thing that doesn't make me thrive is sharing my word when I'm doing that, Sandrine. I don't know how many of you remember, but last year Cindy Solomon said you can't change people's level of courage. Anyone remember that? Sandrine doesn't buy into that. She just says, you need to share your word. Okay, Sandrine. So she said, just think about what excites you. What makes you happy to come to work? And I said, I'm super excited about this event. I'm super excited to work with amazing women. We have them all over our team, all over our organization. Here's what makes me thrive. Hanging out with you for a day, I'm all about it. So, but my favorite one is dirt. Who said dirt? I know. I was like, if I'd thought of dirt, I would have gone with dirt. Except I don't like to get dirty, but I thought it was funny. It's a good one. So, if you don't have anything else to say and you want to meet someone, go with this. Talk to them about their Thrive word. Our agenda for today. So last year we heard people wanted to have even more Q&A. So we've built a lot of Q&A into today. I'm going to invite Padma up in a moment with Elizabeth. They're going to have a fireside chat, and we'll do some Q&A. And then we are going to have Arianna Huffington here, and she will do some Q&A. And then we're going to have all of them up on stage. Padma will lead a panel discussion so she can ask her hard-hitting questions. And then we'll do more Q&A. We're going to give you instructions around lunchtime because we're going to take sort of a quick lunch so you can eat. And then we're going to have Jennifer Nason come in and talk to us about networking. We know that women don't do as much networking as we should, so she's going to give us some of the tips that have been great from her career. And then we're going to have an hour open networking time. We're going to have a number of additional Cisco execs join us, but it's going to be free form, unlike last year where we had assigned people at tables, because we know many of you want to talk to our Cisco execs. Many of you want time to talk to each other. So it's going to be open time networking. Again, great time to make connections, take your SCs, whatever. The afternoon is going to be a workshop facilitated by the Clayman Institute. They've been working with Cisco, and they're going to talk to us about authentic leadership, and that will really be the afternoon in addition to a cupcake break. I know. How could you not like a cupcake break? So that's our agenda. You will see as we start each break, we have some clips that will run, but listen for the videos with music or speaking to come. That's our sign for you to come back and sit down, that we're going to get moving again. Before I introduce Padma, I just want to take a second to comment to CTSO, why do we put this event on? One, we like to have a day where we get to hang out with all of you. But we have a relatively small organization with a big job to do, right? And we need to help work across Cisco to shape our strategy in a way that helps us have sustained differentiation. That's a big task. We need everybody at the table to make that happen. People in CTSO, people in the functions, people in the technology community. And when we have half the population at the table, we know results aren't good. So we want to foster diversity and encourage women to jump in and play. Not like Gigi, like that's exhausting, but in general. And we're lucky to have an amazing woman leader running our organization, and that means we have a responsibility to make sure that we are doing what we can to help encourage you to develop and thrive in your careers. So now to introduce Padma. Many of you know Padma. She's our CTSO, Chief Technology and Strategy Officer. She joined Cisco in 2008 from Motorola, where she was an Executive Vice President and CTO. She's been named one of the 100 most powerful, I like that they use powerful women by Forbes magazine, and one of the 100 most creative people in business by Fast Company. More importantly, she's my boss. She has been a great advocate for me and a friend, so please join me in welcoming Padma.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, and thank you all for joining us today. I know many of you are here from your day jobs, which keeps us all busy, but we feel this is extremely important, and I really appreciate we actually doubled in attendance from last year. And I want to especially thank all of the volunteers that pulled this together. I think it took a lot of extra time on their part, a lot of extra effort, and events like this are hard to do. It's not just getting the room and getting the food. It's coordinating a lot of logistics, especially when we have 6 different locations joining us via video and telepresence. And there is a huge demand for this, which tells me that this event is going to be hugely valuable for all of us. So I want to thank you, all of the Cisco folks and my colleagues who are here. I saw Rebecca Jacoby, our Chief Information Officer, CIO, is here. I think several of the executives are going to be here as well. So Rebecca, by the way, just came back from an amazing vacation. So if you're feeling shy to talk to her, just ask her about her safari, and she'll be happy to share some fun anecdotes about that. And also all our partners. We have some of our customers joining us, and all of our portfolio women from our portfolio companies that are here. Welcome. So it's now my pleasure to introduce someone that I call a dear friend. She's super amazing. I met her a few years ago, and I can't even remember how we met, actually. And I got to talking with her and found that she's a perfect combination of a lot of energy, incredible intellect, and really fun to be with. And her name is Elizabeth Whale. Elizabeth is a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, which, as you know, is one of the largest venture capital firms here located in the Valley, but they look at investments globally across many different themes. We do a lot of work with them jointly. Elizabeth is a partner there now. Prior to that, she was at Twitter, as I was mentioning. She joined Twitter very early on in 2009 and did their corporate development and also some work around product monetization. And if you go on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, and we have to train Susan, that's my goal for next year. She's going to know hashtags, promoted tweets, and she's going to know handles, all these things next year when we come back. But Elizabeth was the first one at Twitter to come up with this concept of promoted tweets, which is the first platform that they created for monetization. As you know, they just went public, and now they're an amazing public company. Outside of her work, Elizabeth is an ultra-marathon runner. Okay, and she is the fittest person I know. She calls me up once in a while and says, "Hey, you want to go for a walk?" And I tell her, "Yeah, if it's in my backyard, I'll go for a walk with her." I feel like I'm afraid to even go on a walk with her because I don't think I can keep up. She and her husband just did a huge run, 100-mile run in the Himalayas at that altitude. So she's amazing. So we'll ask her about that as well. And as if that's not enough, she also is into letterpress and creates beautiful, beautiful cards, which I can witness to. I've been recipient of those. So she's very artistic in how she puts this all together. So she's smart, she's athletic, she's artistic, and she's an amazing woman leader. So it's my pleasure now to welcome Elizabeth to join me on stage.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. First, I need to defend my Twitter handle. So
yes.
I earned at Elizabeth. Right after Stanford, my first job was at a venture capital firm as an analyst, and where you are calling companies that are launching and asking about them, learning if you should actually bring them into the office to talk to the partners about making an investment. And one of those calls was to Biz and Ev. They were working on a company called Odeo, and it was a podcasting company. And I'd given them a call, and we started talking about Odeo, and they said, "Actually, don't worry about this podcasting thing. We launched this beta of this Twitter thing. Let me send you a beta invite, play around with it." So they sent a beta, and I ended up signing up with @Elizabeth, and this was back in 2006, I think. And I tweeted once and then was dormant for 2 years. And when I went back, it said, "Somebody already has this." And I logged in with my usual password and email address. And there I was @Elizabeth. They hadn't kicked me off yet. So I earned it before I ever was at Twitter.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, thanks for joining us. And I kind of gave everyone your background. But maybe I'll start off by asking you, how did you manage, and we have some prepared questions, but I'm going to deviate slightly. But how did you navigate your career? You were sort of at the VC firm first at Menlo, and then went to Twitter, and now you're back. Which I guess 2 questions. How did you decide to make those changes? What drove you to make those changes? And which do you like better, being part of a company or being in the venture business? And by the way, this clock is not running. I don't want to be accused of running over time.
Very fair. So one of the things that I've really stuck to is working with people that I like to be with throughout every stage of my career. So after Stanford, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was thinking big company, little company, or venture capital seemed interesting. And I learned about the role at Menlo Ventures, and it seemed like a great surveying first job where you really got to see the landscape of everything that was here to offer in the Valley. Being able to learn, essentially you're a giant funnel in a role like that, where you're learning about what's interesting and how do you actually ask the right questions to see what you should bubble up. So the one thing I didn't realize through that part of the process was how many people I would actually get to meet that are so influential in this part of the world, and that I still continuously see, 14 or 15 years later. So that started for me, and then when I started to feel like I'd learned enough of that job where the learning curve really had started to flatten, that's when I've always felt like it's time to think, is it next for my next step, and is it time for a change? And at that point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to just learn more about the venture capital industry or jump into something entirely different. So I actually went to a late-stage venture capital firm called Institutional Venture Partners, IVP, and I learned an entirely different skill set there. And when late-stage venture capital, I was doing a lot more on the quant side, and at that point, you have clear metrics and financials for companies, so it was a lot more modeling and a lot less on the creative side of talking to entrepreneurs. And that part was interesting, but it wasn't what totally got me riled up every day. And we were actually fortunate enough to make the investment in Twitter at IVP, and then I started to get to know the company that way from the business side. So that was one of the clear steps where I realized, wow, there's some companies that could be really interesting out there to work at. And a friend of mine had joined Twitter early on, and she had started to get me introduced to the company more socially too. So I knew it from the business side. I started to meet the people, and I found myself working from their office on Fridays and taking my laptop up more and more often. And pretty soon after Dick Costello, now CEO, joined in the fall that year, he needed somebody to look after the corporate development function. There hadn't been anybody at the time doing that there. So it was a big leap of faith. I was so torn at the time, and I remember the feeling of everyone would give their left arm to be in venture capital. Why would I trade this great role on Sand Hill Road? And it was just the right time to take that leap and meet an entirely different set of people. I don't think I realized how busy I could be from going from one role to learning something entirely new, and how much fun I could have at the same time. It was the sort of days where you wouldn't take a break to go to the restroom all day because you were in back-to-back meetings, but you never were looking at a clock. And it was just that invigorating feeling for the entire time I was at Twitter. So the things I've been driven by on when and how do I navigate a career, who do I want to work with, and then what am I learning, and is it continuing to push me and make me happy? Because life has been too short and is too short to not get up and want to do what you do every single day with the people you want to do it with.
I think that's very true even for me. I tell people always look at a career opportunity as an opportunity to learn. And I think sometimes we hesitate, especially women. I know I've talked about this. I find women actually, we tend to evaluate all aspects and all dimensions, and we focus a lot on the risk rather than the upside when we make a change. And I tell people it's good to evaluate risk, but take the leap and make the change, because there is so much to learn when you go to a new job. And actually meeting new people too. You create and expand your sphere of influence, right? So what are you seeing as the big technology trends now that you're at Andreessen Horowitz? You're back in the venture world. And Andreessen, of course, has a big portfolio across both consumer and enterprise. So what excites you when you look at opportunities and trends in technology?
So the interesting thing about the Andreessen Horowitz position I'm in now, and it even tacks on to the which do I prefer. Right now, I feel like I'm in the best of both worlds. So one of the biggest trends in venture capital right now is, I think, really the changing of the venture capital industry. And I think that's something that Andreessen Horowitz has led and is doing extremely well. So for a lot of you that know about the traditional venture capital firm side, it's mostly about investing in good companies and working for the returns of those ones with the entrepreneurs. And in Andreessen Horowitz, we do that. But we've also expanded this network of all of the people that work at Andreessen Horowitz to really help our portfolio companies and the entrepreneurs grow in the other ways that aren't just investment focused. So the team that I'm on is called the Market Development Team. So essentially, I spend my day with Fortune 500, Global 2000 CMOs, chief digital folks, CEOs, learning what's on their innovation roadmaps, where their strategies are taking them that they need to be disrupting and changing, and how can we introduce them to portfolio companies of ours and technologies we know about to make their businesses grow and to help our portfolio companies get to market at the same time. So that's one of the things I'm seeing as far as huge trends that are changing in venture capital. We're also doing that across executive talent. So how do we help get the right people into these portfolio companies? How do we help them with their next steps of when they raise capital? Where do they do it from? How do you recruit and hire some of the best designers and engineers for those companies? So we're doing this across the entire network.
Mm-hmm. What excites you in terms of the space that you see? What do you think will be the next big Twitter or Google? Anything on the horizon? Is it wearables? Is it IoT? We talk a lot at Cisco about Internet of Things and Internet of Everything. Do you think that's hype right now, or do you think that's becoming real?
The things that really spark me, I think a lot of this is real. The fact that we all have a mobile device in our pockets every single day, and then what this real-time economy that's being created now can really make our life easier in all of these senses. That's one of the spaces that I really get excited about. So you think of every service out there, like the Lyfts and the Ubers of the world, the TaskRabbits, the Kitchets, the anything you can do, HomeJoys, things that you need done right now, that can be done at the tap of a button. And then I also really like looking at the other side that the Fortune 500s are bringing to us. So these areas of they want to know about their customers and where online and offline are converging, and how can they see that attribution, and how do they bring it all together. So some of the trends that those larger companies for us are bubbling up, I find extremely interesting.
Yeah, so switching a little bit to the personal side now in leadership, you have an extremely busy life. You have a very active lifestyle, a lot on your plate at work. You're going to be a new mom. Congratulations.
7 weeks away.
That's going to be a whole another experience. How do you manage your time, and how do you know that you're spending equal amounts of time on things that are important? And I'm actually purposely staying away from the word balance because I don't believe in that. I think it just balance to me always conjures up like this perfection that as human beings we're always going to be in control of everything, and life is not like that. There are days that are going to be full of chaos and you just have to go with the flow. Just like at work, right? We have a whole schedule planned and something happens, my boss shows up and I have to cancel a bunch of meetings. Personal life is like that too. So what techniques do you use to make sure that you are doing what is important to you on a particular day or on the long term?
Yeah. So probably one of my coping mechanisms, I am very much a creature of habit. And if you ask anybody that knows me, I have a few non-negotiables in my day. And because those are non-negotiables, that they are factored in. For example, I'm a morning worker-outer. I always joke that I probably wouldn't shower if I didn't work out in the morning. So no matter what I have that morning, it usually just depends what time do I set the alarm clock for to actually get that workout in. So this morning was
that discipline.
It's a little extra early. But I either get a run or a swim in every morning. And for me, how do I do the things I love but also overlap them with the people I like to spend time with and the things I also like to do? So I have a few staunch running partners that know where to meet me, and we basically chat for an entire hour each morning. And I also look at that as where I get some of this like therapy time, where you're talking about your day from yesterday and what's going on. And some days it's your running partner that just chats about everything, and some days I'm blabbing. And then my swimming time is totally me time, and I'm in my head, and so that's something that doesn't get cut out every day. And then also, I think cutting out a lot of the decision making that's just the every single day thing. Like it's the exact same thing for breakfast every single day. And I go to the same deli and they know that I get the exact same sandwich. And some of these things seem boring, but it really cuts out a lot of complexity when you want to cram a lot in. So some of those little things on the corner cutting, I think.
I actually met a male executive one time who said like they wear the same color shirt every day because that takes decision. I think that would work for me.
Not that extreme. But I think the other thing when it comes into work is, again, working with the people you like to be with. There's some that you want to get to know, and then it can feel like both a work meeting, but you're actually enjoying that person. So, maybe if you're meeting somebody for lunch or a cup of coffee, yes, you're getting business accomplished, but you're also talking about real life things. And I think that, that also makes you really bring you back to being more authentic with the people you're actually spending your time with.
Okay, great. So let's talk. One of the questions, I think it's a great Are there times in your journey where you've had obstacles that you've had? Can you hear me? Am I losing this? Can you hear me now?
Test 2.
Thank you.
We're running later.
I think I heard you. Did you hear her? She wants to go be her running partner. So were there times when you had to go through obstacles, whether they were personal or at work, where there was a tough situation, and how did you manage through that?
That's a good question. One of the things that was probably the hardest decision for me and comes to mind as being it's a big pivot point in my life too. Twitter is in San Francisco, and I have always lived on the peninsula. I live in Portola Valley. We bought our home there because Portola Valley is the only city that has more running trails than actual roads. It seemed like the place for us. And every day I got on the freeway, and luckily it was 280, so it was a long drive, but it wasn't a traffic-filled drive. But it was cutting out 2 hours of my day, every single day. And it started to add up, and it always weighed on me. And the part I left out, my husband also worked at Twitter. We met on the triathlon team at Stanford. We didn't meet at Twitter. He was running an entirely different team. So we were there at the same time. And everyone's like, oh, you probably had this great commute together and got caught up. No, we ended up taking 2 cars, and we both paid for gas, and we both paid for parking in the city. And I just remember this, weighing on me, that this was just there's so much wasted time, so much wasted energy of this commute. And it was always something that I love my job so much, so it was worth doing. And for anyone that knows me, and my mom basically grew up in Sacramento, and she is so thrifty, and in a very loving way, but and I remember her saying to me, because we were trying to commute together, because I had this idea like we should be more efficient, and she said to me, if it means that you decouple your commute with Kevin and take your own car and have your own autonomy, and that means you're not sitting in the parking garage at 7:20 and mad because he's 20 minutes late, that will at least give you some peace of mind to take back your extra time. When she said I should do that, then it made me think, oh, all right, like that's one thing that I can check and start making the commute a little bit better. So I started doing that and did that for about 2.5 years, and that's still a lot of hours in the car solo every day. And it was still the thing that just weighed on me because I was waking up early. I'd get my runs in the dark, and it was just different. I was never in my house in daylight hours, and I loved being at home. And the decision to leave Twitter for me was probably primarily around the commute. And it seemed like such a, am I a wimp on this one? Is it something that, I can do this? And I have basically reclaimed 2 hours of my life now by being closer to home and work. And even though I left people I really loved to work with, but it was just one of those parts in my life that I think I didn't realize was my number one factor when deciding job and work and lifestyle, and finding what is important to you in that way and getting to that faster and really making that your top and anchoring on it, I think helps a whole lot. So
yeah, we have to sell something we make called telepresence to Twitter, I think. That would solve that problem. But actually, that's true. I think sometimes we make decisions related to career because it suits our lifestyle better. And I think that's okay. I think oftentimes we're hard on ourselves when we have to do that, and we judge ourselves more. And I think maybe women do this a lot more too. So thank you for sharing that. Are we taking questions? I know Claire's going to kill me because she instructed me on this like 10 times. We're not taking questions from the audience. We are taking questions. Okay, sorry. Okay, I want to make sure that I get enough questions. So keep your questions. Think about the questions. I'm going to ask Elizabeth a couple more, and then I'll go to the audience. So what is your one word for thrive? I know that wasn't prepared. So
I thought I was going to do this after. I got back to the Sharpies on the table.
I don't follow instructions very well.
I can think of one.
Okay.
Probably the dueling. Enthusiasm and energy. And I think bringing those to both work and life and the people you are with, that's probably my version of thrive.
Great. Energy. That's a good
energy.
one. All right. How about tell us a little bit about letterpress, because I'm interested in art. And for me, my me time is when I'm painting. I paint on Saturdays, and when I do that, I can really tune out everything else and totally be focused on that. And I know I've seen your work. It's amazing. How did you get into this? How does it help you do what you do at work better? Or is it just a stress relief? How do you think about that?
So I started this company called Paper Wheel, letterpress and design business about a little more than 8 years ago now. And it started from a business connection. I remember I was at a business lunch and somebody handed me their business card, and all I could do was admire the printing, and I'd never seen that form of printing before. And I asked, I said, what is this? And they said, that's letterpress. And I stuck that card away and figured I'd go find out anything I could about it later. And I started learning all about letterpress. And for those of you that don't know, it's the deep impression in paper. So if you think of Gutenberg presses, that setting lead type and pushing it into the paper, so making that deep impression. So the only one that's indented. And so I started learning everything about it. And I found a place to take a class. And I thought, okay, this will at least just expose me to it. And I took that class, and unfortunately, I really liked it. And I was kind of hoping it would turn into this, okay, good, now I know how to scrapbook, or now I know how to knit or something. And I don't have to get all of the supplies to do it. But I really enjoyed it. So then I remember taking a week off of work to do this intensive 5 days. And I thought, okay, that's going to get me sick of it. And I'm going to realize I don't want to pursue this really. And that week I spent it, and I just loved it. And I was in that zone that I know you get in when you're painting. It's just you're thinking of entirely different things, and the time just flies. So I started to just do this and then troll the internet to see if I could find a press. There's very few presses left in the world in the United States. My press is from 1923. They're not being made anymore. So you usually find them in the middle of the country in these huge shops run by people that are selling their grandparents' estates. And I found a 92-year-old man on Craigslist that was selling this little letterpress. And I asked my husband if he'd go with me to see it. It was in San Francisco in a basement. We went after work one night, and I walked down the stairs, and it's still covered in red ink, and it's this dinky thing that's it's all steel. It's about 1,000 pounds. And I looked at it, and I was like, no way. And I think it was $3,000. And I said, I'm leaving. And my husband said to me, he said, write that man a check. I'm loading it into the car. You're going to regret it if you don't. And he was so right. But then I found myself with this letterpress machine. And I think the part in me that was like, oh, well, now I have to turn this into something. I can't have this $3,000 machine and just have it be a hobby. So I started printing. And a friend of mine asked if I could design their custom wedding or their custom Christmas cards for that year. And I said yes, but I had no clue. I didn't know how to use Illustrator. I didn't know how to get plates made. And it was this entire learning process of, okay, each step I know I'm going to have to solve it, and how do I do it? So I got that done somehow, and it was the most stressful but most fun process at the same time. And then she wrote a check to what I was calling myself Paper Wheel. And I thought, shoot, I can't deposit this check. I don't have a bank account with Paper Wheel. So then I had to learn about the whole incorporation process and getting a business license and all of these things and getting a bank account. And so it's been every step of Paper Wheel over the last few years that every project has pushed me a little bit more, every weird tweak or problem, or how do you ship to Abu Dhabi, like every little thing through this business that's just made me learn a different part of the art and the craft. And being a small business owner. So
is Paper Wheel just you, or do you have people?
It's mostly just me. I actually do have a wonderful gal that helps me pack and ship orders. We have an Etsy shop that kind of is all the things we've already made, and then most of the business is custom. And then I have a girl that can help me do quotes and things like that, and some early designs. But I'm still doing all of the printing, and each piece is hand-fed, so it's just my zone time, where nights or weekends I'm out there and with a stack of 500 cards to print, you're just in this zone. It's pretty therapeutic.
That's cool. Very cool. All right. Any questions for Elizabeth? I guess raise your hand. We have people with mics at the back. There's one here. Do you want to shout it out? I'll repeat it if you.
you said you're going to be a new mom. So how do you think that's going to change your non-negotiables?
Let me repeat the question. I don't know if everyone heard the question. You know, she talked about having her time that's non-negotiable, and she's going to be a new mom. And I said, with kids, life gets to be a chaos. So how are you going to deal with that?
Oh, I respect every person out here that has children and that just deals with these other things. I know that I've had it relatively easy so far, and in 7 weeks, things are going to drastically change. I've thought about this a lot because I've had a lot of moms. I have a great community of kind of tech women in Portola Valley, and we get together once a month, and so many of them are like, oh yeah, sign that running thing goodbye. Like, you think you're fit now, that's going to change. And all of these, you know, just little remarks. And I really do. I know for me to be happy and healthy and centered, I need that. So that is going to be something, whether I have to pay for it or whether I have to, you know, adjust schedules with my husband. That's something, at least on my health side, that I want to hold true. And I'm probably being extremely naive, but I really do want to factor that in. One of the things that I saw growing up, my mom she's now 72 years old. She's still running marathons and still swimming 2,000 yards in the pool every day. And she says she has to do 100 meters of butterfly to know she's not dead. So she still does that. So, but growing up, she got up at 4 a.m. every single morning, and she was out the door at 4:15. She drove down to our neighborhood pool. It opened at 4:30. And she got her swim in, and then she was a second grade teacher for nearly 30 years. And she came back, honked the horn in the driveway, and it was time to take me to school. And I had to have been fed and dressed. And she made it work somehow. And I remember through those, angsty years when I, was wanting to be selfish and say, you should be home with me. She told me that this was something that made her a better mom, and that she needed to get her swim in every morning, and that we had other time that we could fill, but it was her thing. And I respect her phenomenally for doing that now. And now, having seen that, and yes, she was having to get dressed in the car and eat as she drove me to school, but how much she prioritized that, and how much it made me realize that I'm allowed to prioritize that. And then later in life, we actually started running together in 4th grade because I needed to learn my states and capitals. And my parents were divorced at the time, so it was the only time we had kind of one-on-one time. So we started going out for 3 miles in the neighborhood before dinner so I could recite my states and capitals. She probably hated that. But it was our time together, and it was realizing that you could multitask and do something both for our bodies and our minds at the same time. And I think if I can use that as a guiding light, I think motherhood is going to be harder than I expect at all. But I hope to have some of those type of things really anchor me to what is important, even as I grow a child.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me in that is to include your children in your life and your activity. And I think I have a similar story. When my son was young, I was traveling a lot for work, and it was such a bad experience in the beginning because he was like 2 and he'd start crying the minute I took a suitcase out because he kind of associated that with mom being gone. And so he'd cry and I'd cry. Mohan would go running. My husband would go running. That was like, oh, I can't deal with it. So I decided this isn't working. I have to turn this into a game. So I made it into a game where I would teach my son, who's now 20, at the time he was 2, about the countries I was going to, the currency and the culture. And soon, every time I took my suitcase out, it was like, where are you going now? I'm like, you went to Korea last time. Go somewhere else, Mom. So I think the thing is to include our children in what's important to us and make them part of it. So that's a great takeaway. Thank you. Any other questions? Back there? Thanks, Arti.
I wanted to first say thank you so much for saying that it's okay to quit if the commute is really long. I always question that because before I started at Cisco, that was about 4 years ago. I just quit eBay for whatever reason. I was burnt out, and I was looking. I was really intensely looking, and all the calls were from San Francisco. And at that time, I made the decision not to go because my son was 2 years old. I just didn't want to spend 3 hours. And it was so nice to hear someone else say, someone who's powerful and, upcoming to say that it's okay to quit something that doesn't fit in your commute. Really, there are some non-negotiables and there are some not. So I was curious, when you actually quit Twitter, did you already have something lined up, or did you just quit out of just being tired?
Good question. I actually did have something lined up, and I think I took a little more time than I thought to get comfortable with the fact that I was actually doing it, because it really, at that point in Twitter's life cycle, that really had become my community and my friend base, and it really was family at that point to me. So it was over a number of months, but I had signed with Andreessen Horowitz by the time I left Twitter. And I've also not been very good about taking time between jobs. And this was the first time that I actually carved out that India trip, actually. So I did have something lined up, but I transitioned out of Twitter, and then my husband and I went to India for 3.5 weeks, where we did run that 100-mile race.
They weren't just sitting on a beach.
Hindsight, I should have been. And then I did start at Andreessen Horowitz. So I've never quit cold turkey. And I've spoken with so many folks that I really respect that too. I think there's always some circumstance that when it's right for you. And there's some people that, it's worth hanging on because of some life reasons to make it. And then sometimes it's just really worth cutting chains and realizing what's next will find you when it needs to. But yeah, in that situation, I already had Andreessen Horowitz lined up.
Great. Any other questions? One here.
I need to run more.
Heels.
Hi, so I just started doing marathons myself.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Maybe, sorry, if you have questions, raise your hand so the mic guys can get to you and you can be next. Sorry, go ahead.
And so I'm really fascinated with the fact that you do ultras, because I have all the respect for...
We'll get you there. It's a gateway drug, marathons.
So really want to find out what's going through your head as you're really facing the tough miles during your ultra races, especially probably mile 80, when you've been running for about 36 hours.
Drive that.
How do you keep on going?
Some days it's easier than others. It's never easy though. So even on the starting small side, the thing I tell myself, even on a morning run, is you're never going to feel worse after you run. Like when you're questioning, do I get out of the door, or do I listen to the alarm go off one more time, or do I get that extra 35 minutes of sleep? So I never feel worse. So that's always something I kind of arm myself with going out there. But on these really long ones, I do agree with it's all a mental game, and some miles are horribly tough compared to that. But I think at that point, your body can get through it. Like for those of you so the definition of an ultra technically is anything longer than a marathon. So the traditional distance is maybe a 50-miler, 50K, 100-miler, 100K. So those are the main distances. And usually these runs, as you can imagine, they're on trails. They're not out on asphalt, because where are you going to go? And that was what really got me into them. So the fact that I am out on these dirt trails, so much terrain, so much elevation, that you're really doing things like with your mind the whole time, and you don't really even realize it. So I'm always in these beautiful places, and I think that's the part that really gets me through the tough miles. Like I can get into this spot in my head where I'm thinking about all sorts of things. I go through my work bucket, I go through my paper wheel bucket, I go through my life things, and I usually don't listen to music when I'm out on races and things, but you're taking in, there's all of this terrain, you're looking at different routes you're hopping over, weather, other people that are out there, which you're not usually near, and I can't imagine not having that alone time and how centering it is. So I don't know what it really is as far as do I think about certain mile markers. On ultras, one of the best things you say, you run aid station to aid station, and you're needing to fuel at all of these. So basically you picture Costco at each aid station. So it's It's like, do I want Ruffles or Oreos or peanut butter? I mean, and so that, you start spending a mile about, oh, what am I going to eat at the aid station? So that takes a little bit of time. But really, going through, I go through family members, I go through friends, conversations I've had. I go through every day, I try to think through my entire schedule for that week and how much can I remember of what's going on. So preparing things. So there's no real science to it, but just getting more centered.
I think there's one there, and we'll come
Yes, I would like to ask a question. If magic wand is given in your hand and you have been asked to change one thing for women, what that would be?
Oh, that's a tough question. Change one thing for... That's a tough question. One of the things that I don't know how many of you feel like part of it's your job or you're burdened with it or it's just, it's a reality. But I don't know, now it's like two sides because I'll explain this, but I don't know if it's something I would actually change because I think it brings a lot of value too, is I think, stereotypes you can say, or just our role in the home or the way, we've kind of the role we take on. Like I think forever, yes, I manage more of our house and our home and our side life and things we do and family and so my first thing would be wave that wand and make it be totally split and have my husband stress about the pile of mail that's stacking up just as much as I do and call the gardener because this sprinkler is turning on. So part of me, the main thing that came to mind was I wish we had this equality to just wipe all of these other things so we could prioritize all that we get to do in the workplace more too and what we want to be, how we want to be successful in our professional lives. But the counter to that for me would be, I think these other roles we play in life and with people and other parts of communities really invigorates and enriches our business life. So I think we are better leaders because of the fact that we hold these other skills and traits and these responsibilities. So I don't know if I would give it up, but that's my thought process and how I would think about that. Is that a good question or a good enough answer?
You can come back
Both
later.
sides of it.
Great.
Hi, my name is Virginia, and I'll be joining the CTS group on Monday. I just signed my offer letter.
All right. Wow. Yay.
So my new manager, Anne Sophie, was kind enough to invite me to this development.
Oh, great.
So my question is for you. I read this article from Max Sabinski. I think he's a partner over at Andreessen Horowitz as well. And he was talking about not wanting to invest in startups in Russia because he claims it's a mafia state. And then there's so many questions I can ask around this, but I wanted to know, how does that affect your decision-making, the current affairs that are happening today?
So actually, that's entirely outside of what I work on at the firm. So Max sits on a different team. So as I mentioned before, I sit on what we call our market development team. So really, I'm less involved in the day-to-day investments, especially global investing. So I would say I can't speak on that point specifically because I spend my time on something entirely else.
So what's the question? How do we make decisions on where to invest or what regions and is that the question? When you make a decision. I cannot answer that from a Cisco perspective. I think we make investments. We are about $2 billion under management. When we make decisions on which area to invest in or what area we're not going to invest in from a geo perspective, right? We are investors also on a global basis. It's not a long-term impact. I think, for example, if we decide for one particular region of the world is unstable and we don't want to take the risk of perhaps investing heavily in that region, we would shift investments to another region, but it's not something that would impact us long term. I think it's a temporary thing. Maybe you'll miss an amazing startup in that particular region, But usually if the technology is great, they will sustain, and then we can go back always. And so some of these things tend to be more temporary and blips based on the geopolitical risks that we see and the economic risks that we see on a global basis. So I think every fund, usually most funds are global. Some funds, some venture capitalists focus only in the US. So I'm sure decisions like that, in a broad-based, usually are temporary decisions based on political unrest or economic unrest. All right, there's the next question back there. And who's next after that? So I know where to go. Aarti, do you have someone? I think there was a question here. Do you want to bring it up here?
First of all, I wanted to thank you for setting the concept of the non-negotiable. I love that, and I think as women, we tend to be more malleable, where they can kind of get pushed around a little more. It's great that, and I think we all should be doing that. We should have the things that we come to work and we say, I do this. You're hiring me or whatever, just, it is, even at the beginning or even with a new boss. These are the things I have to have. I think it's just a great concept, so I really appreciate you putting it out there. Secondarily, let's say you've just hired somebody or you're mentoring somebody. What are the three, as a woman, what would be to her the three pieces of advice you would give her?
That's a
good question.
What would you tell me?
Likewise. I might want your advice on this one.
I have lots of advice, but that's good or not, I don't know.
One of the first things for me would be, this be authentic. And I know we hear that word a lot, but really being true to who you are and not having to be a different person to both work and friends and life, it makes life a whole lot simpler, I think. So one would be to be authentic and to just know who you are. Making other teammates and people that you work with look good. I think that's something that early managers I've seen, or early employees, they're so wanting to have these first wins, these solo wins, to make themselves look good and to earn those stripes. But I've never seen a situation go badly when you make your other teammates and the other people you work with look good. So that would be a second point of advice. And then a third would be, I would have to bring it back to the non-negotiables. I think that even no matter what stage you are in your career, you should have something that's so important to you that you're not worth shaking that, no matter if it's work or schedules. And I know that we have to adjust things and make things fit, and there's always a reason that things can change. But I would say to have something that makes you light up and talk about and keep that true even while you're in a horribly busy career or in a really tough stage of life. So have a non-negotiable that can make you happy and make you kind of shine in some different way.
That's a great point. Be authentic, make your team look good, make your colleagues look good, and think about what is it that you're truly passionate about. That's your place to go to find that creativity, and don't give that up. That's great. All right, we have 6 minutes left, so I think I have time for maybe 2-3 questions.
Hi, I'm Carly.
Who's got the next question so I know where to go? I'm not wasting time. Anyone else after this? Where's the next mic?
I'm going to start asking questions.
Okay,
I have baby advice.
Actually, I have a couple.
How will I manage this?
Okay, there's one there. Okay, go. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Carly Levin. I'm joining from JP Morgan today. I'm curious how far ahead you plan in your career. Do you have a long-term goal, or do you just plan year to year?
For as much of a planner as I am, I have not and haven't really, do not plan entirely my career. That said, like I said earlier, I want to keep learning and I want to work with people that I really enjoy. So I would say I feel comfortable with the framework I've set for myself of what my career is going to look like. But I have not plotted that I want to stay here 2.5 years and then jump to this type of role for another 3.5 years and then ultimately do this. And so I've argued this with a few people, like, is that being naive about where you want to drive your career, and are you steering it in the right direction? I think so many, especially young women, come to me and they say, oh my gosh, you've had this amazing career, and how did you plan this out perfectly? And this is really where it's like, hindsight is 20/20. Like, you look back on your career and it makes perfect sense that yes, I went from here to here to here, and it tells a linear story that is absolutely, unshakable. But that's never the case. And if you're anchoring on the framework that's important to you, that I think we should each set independently in our lives and know what drives us and what makes us want to work and where do we want to go in theory, I think that is the way that I've guided my career to date.
That's great. Yeah, I don't think it is ever, it's impossible to plan and say, it's not like a GPS, you enter the destination and it tells you which route, right? There's a lot of detours you have to take, which is probably true for most of us. I think for myself, I would say, it is at that point where you get to a stage in every job, you feel like you're not learning anymore, and that's a time to make a change and picking something where you're learning. I always advise people, make sure you're adding new skills to your toolkit and your resume. And I think that's how I feel like you build a career. So great question. We have one more here.
So hi, good morning. My name is Chantel Breitup. A question for you, Elizabeth, especially for the girls and the women here early in career. Can you talk about the role of mentors and coaches through your life and what your advice would be for them?
Yes, I definitely believe in having mentors and coaches, though I've never had a formal mentor or coach. I would say by being an authentic person and knowing who you are and kind of being self-aware about what traits you have and other people you like spending time with, start collecting people that you enjoy spending time with. And I think one of the biggest mistakes is to say, I want to mentor, I'm going to ask this person to mentor me, and have breakfast on the first Thursday of every month and have it being really, really rigid. But start collecting people that you admire. And what I've tried to do is, I wish I had one person that said that I aspired to be exactly like, because it would make things a whole lot easier and a whole lot more efficient. But having this, toolkit in a sense of women that I admire, but there's one or two things I pull from each of them. And at that point, they're all people I enjoy spending time with. I love either grabbing a glass of wine or going on a walk or having a lunch with. And if you have enough people that you enjoy and then you're spending time with them and pulling out those one or two things, like somebody that I really admire for how amazing of a mother she is. One, for how much she's really prioritized work and being a female executive. One that's prioritized more, athletics. If you have these things that are in your framework and you're pulling those out from these individual mentors, I think that has guided me. And then I also think the reverse of giving back. So even if you're young and early in your career, there's somebody that's looking up to you for something too. And I think giving that back when somebody asks for a 30-minute call to talk about a job you had or something you're interested, returning that favor too, I think really helps balance that. But I would encourage everyone to seek out a group of women that they enjoy spending time with and really asking some of those questions. And don't make a conversation just about work, but ask about life or commute or how they're juggling things with family. And I think getting into that nitty-gritty is always really rewarding too.
Great. So we're almost out of time. Thank you. Oh, there's one more. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Denise Lombard, and I'm with Cisco. I'm going to assume that the VC world is predominantly males. And wondering, as a woman, have you had any specific issues or have you seen it, and how have you addressed it?
Well, probably to the fairy wand question, like the thing I really wish I could change is that there were more than 50% of females on the leadership committees of all of the Fortune 500 especially, but then all of the private tech companies as well. So yes, I think there's a huge issue, and I hope that we correct it authentically too through this. It has not held me back, or I haven't thought about it in that way. I've just tried to do good work at the places I am. Yes, usually you're one of the few. I was at a dinner this week around a huge boardroom table with 25 powerful men, and there's one female. And that's not rare. But I think looking at the positive of those situations, like you stand out. People remember that my name's Elizabeth. They remember meeting you at a cocktail party. Like looking at all of the good things about being in a really as much smaller pool, I think for now, championing that and then really hoping to and helping to drive the growth of balancing that out a bit more is what I aspire to do.
Great. Now we are truly out of time. Any closing comments from you, Elizabeth? Anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, I really have always been inspired and impressed by you and how much I think Padma is an authentic leader, and that's would be one of the women on my definition list of that. I've always liked how you show both your artistic side and your life side, and that you've just always been quite an impressive woman to me. So thank you for including me here, and thanks to all of you for having me here as well. But
thank you for joining us, and we'll be back. I'm going to hand this back to Susan, and I'll come back with Elizabeth later for a panel.
Perfect. So 3 things. 1, did you catch that she talks when she runs for an hour? How do you pant? That's ridiculous. 2, that's not what pregnant looks like. I can't get myself on that chair at 7 months pregnant. No. 3, and most importantly, Rebecca Jacoby followed me on Twitter. I'm going to say something good. Just wait. So we have a break now. We're going to come back at 9:45 with Arianna. We'll go right into Padma introducing her. So please be back on time. We'll run a video, so listen for that, and you'll know when to come back.
As long as I I asked her to stay, but she wouldn't listen. And she left before I had the chance to say, oh, the words it would mend, the things that were broken. But now it's far too late, she's gone away. Every night you cry yourself to sleep, thinking, why does this happen to me? Why does every moment have to be so hard? Hard to believe that it's not over tonight. Just give me one more chance to make it right. I may not make it through the night. I won't go home without you. The taste of her breath I'll never get over. And the noises that she made kept me awake. Oh, the weight of the things that remained unspoken built up so much it crushed us every day. Every night you cry yourself to sleep, thinking, why does this happen to me? Why does every moment have to be so hard? Hard to believe it, it's not over tonight. Just give me one more chance to make it right. I may not make it through the night. I won't go home without you. Oh, it's not over tonight. Just give me one more chance to make it right. I may not make it through the night. I won't go home without you. All the things I felt but never really showed. Perhaps the worst is that I never let you go. Should I never let you go? It's not over tonight. Just give me one more chance to make it right. I may not make it through the night. I won't go home without you. It's not over tonight. Just give me one more chance to make it right. I may not make it through the night. I won't go home without you. And I won't go home without you. And I won't go home without you. I won't go home without you. I wanna live life, never be cruel. And I wanna live life and be good to you. And I wanna fly, never come down. Live my life and have friends around. We So I wanna live in a wooden house. I wanna live life and always be true. I wanna live life from beginning to you. I wanna fly, never come down, and live my life and have friends around. We never changed, we We never left. So I wanna live in a wooden house. We're making more friends would be easy. Oh, and I don't have a soul to say. Yes, and I sin every single day. We never changed, do we? We never learned to read. So I wanna live in a wooden house. We're making more friends with bees. I wanna live where the sun comes out. where you are, come back down, and I won't tell them your name. I wanna hold the hand inside you. I wanna take the breath that's true. I look to you when I see nothing. I look to you to see the truth. You live your life, you go in shadow. You'll come apart and you'll go blind. Some kind of night into your darkness. Close your eyes with what's not there.
I don't think women can have it all. I just don't think so. We pretend we have it all. We pretend we can have it all. My husband and I married for 34 years, and we have 2 daughters. And every day you have to make a decision on whether you are going to be a wife or a mother. In fact, many times during the day, you have to make those decisions. And you have to co-opt a lot of people to help you. We co-opted our families to help us. We plan our lives meticulously so we can be decent parents. But if you ask our daughters, I'm not sure they will say that I've been a good mom. I'm not sure. And I try all kinds of coping mechanisms. I mean, I'll tell you a story that happened when my daughter went to Catholic school, Convent of Sacred Heart. And every Wednesday morning, they have class coffee with mothers. Class coffee with mothers for a working woman. How is it going to work? How am I going to take off 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings to go for class coffee? So I missed most class coffees. My daughter would come home and she'd say, list of all the mothers that were there, and you were not their mom. First few times, I would die with guilt. But I developed coping mechanisms. I called the school and I said, give me a list of mothers who were not there. So when she came home in the evening, she'd say, you were not there, you were not there. I said, Mrs. Rag wasn't there, Mrs. So-and-so wasn't there. So I'm not the only bad mother. You have to cope because you die with guilt. You just die with guilt. My observation, David, is that the biological clock and the career clock are in total conflict with each other. Total, complete conflict. When you have to have kids, you have to build your career. Just as you're rising to middle management, your kids need you because they're teenagers. They need you for the teenage years. And that's the time your husband becomes a teenager too. So he needs you. Sorry. They need you too. So what do? And as you grow even more, your parents need you because they're aging. So we're screwed. I mean, we cannot have it all.
All right. Wasn't that great? That's amazing. So thank you all for coming back. We are on to our next part of our session. Actually, this part of the session, we are excited to be joined by over 125 of our customers, partners, and employees over telepresence that are joining us. And we have a second group within Cisco called the Cisco Empowered Women's Network. They're also joining us. The founders of that group, I see some of them on telepresence. I want to thank them. This is a group of volunteers, Anuja Singh, Rima, Almadine, and Priscilla. These three women I met at a Cisco Live event. Cisco Live, as you know, is a big partner conference that we run. We typically get 26,000 people joining us. And a few years ago, I noticed I always keynote at this conference as your CTO, and I was keynoting, and I noticed that I hardly saw any women in the audience. So I went up to our New York sales office, and I said to, I don't remember, one of these women, Anuja, Rima, or someone, and said, I'm curious to know how many women we actually have at Cisco Live. And the percentage was like 3%. And not only that, we've been doing Cisco Live for 25 years, 26 years, and we've never had a gathering of even those 3% women that show for this conference. So these three women took it upon themselves to change that ratio. And we did a Cisco Empowered Women's Network event at Cisco Live 2 years ago, and it was so oversubscribed. And we had not only Cisco women, but our partner community, our customer community, every part of the industry that we touch, we can influence if we take the initiative. So this last year, we actually raised that percentage up from 3 to 8%. So it's a big step. We have a long way to go. And so they're joining us for this part of the session as well. And I would like to now introduce Elizabeth Sherman, who's a core member of the Cisco Empowered Women's Network group that runs that other program. And she's going to invite the different sites that are joining us remotely. So Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Padma. I'm here with a wonderful group of customers, partners, and employees here in the Boston office. And as you said, the Empowered Women's Network is all about networking together, motivating together, empowering each other, and going outside the walls of Cisco to do that. So just a big thank you to you, Padma, and your organization for allowing us to extend the reach of this incredible development day outside of San Jose. So thank you so much to you and your organization. And as you said, Empowered Women's Network started just less than 2 years ago. And we're now in 4 continents, and we've reached about 3,000 women. So we are really, really proud and thankful to our founders. So as you mentioned, so we're here in Boston with all of these wonderful, wonderful women, and actually one man. So thank you to our one man. And I'll just say this regarding Cisco Live, that we're so thrilled with 8%. But we want to see double digits. So we want all of you to come out in droves in 2015 so we can get it up to at least 10%. That's our goal. All right, so now I'm going to take just a minute and go around and welcome this amazing Empowered Women's Network community in 6 sites around the country. So I'm going to start with New York City. In New York, we have our 3 founders, Priscilla, Rima, and Anuja, as well as my co-lead on this event, Emily Griffin. And our site host there today is Ryan Bondi Lynch. So let's let New York say a quick hello.
Hi, so live from New York, I am Ryan Bondi Lynch, and we are very excited to be a part of this event. So, and in the room we have some customers like Verizon, JP Morgan Chase, and some wonderful local partners such as Custom Computers and Skyline ATS.
New York for
Thank you so much, Ryan. All right, next we're going to go to Farmington with host Lori Laterza.
Hi, Elizabeth. We're here. Thanks again for including us. We're excited to be here, and we're here also with DiData and Mass Mutual, and looking forward to today.
Great. Thank you to our partners and customers for joining us as well.
And next, we're going to go to Raleigh.
Hi there. We are so excited to be here. We have a wonderful group from BB&T and Dimension Data, and we just want to send a huge thank you to all of the extraordinary women who are participating today and made today possible.
Thank you, Carissa. That's Carissa Latta in Raleigh. Next, we'll go to Atlanta with site host Deidre Brown and executive sponsor AVP Jeff Sherritt.
Hey, so welcome and good afternoon to everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm surrounded by a wonderful group of ladies that are excited for a great event. So thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you, Atlanta.
Thank you for your sponsorship, Jeff. All right, and finally, we'll go to the Chicago office with site host Karen Greenland and executive sponsor Sandy Hogan.
Good afternoon, Sandy Hogan here. We have 20 fabulous, thriving women here looking forward to today. Woo!
Awesome. Well, thank you again to all the site hosts and all of our executive sponsors. And I'll just quickly introduce Edna Conway, who's our Chief Security Officer for Supply Chain, and she's here today as our executive sponsor in Boston.
So we're here in Boston with a number of our partners, our customers, and representatives from development, supply chain, as well as sales organization. And we just want to let you all know that not only are we excited, but we're here because we're Boston strong.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Padma, before we pass it back to you guys to get to Arianna, just a couple quick notes. If you want to stay engaged with the Empowered Women's Network, please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. We use social media as the way to connect to our customers and partners. So go into that search box and search Cisco Empowered Women's Network in LinkedIn and Twitter. And let's drive up our LinkedIn membership numbers. We'd love to communicate with you that way. And on September 17th, we have, again, our next event with Diane Cashin. It's focused on who are you and what do you want? And it's the second in a series, and we would love you to join us remotely for that September 17th Diane Cashin event, and we'll communicate more details through our social media channels for that as well. So thank you again, Padma, to you and the entire CTSO team. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity, and we'll get to the main event now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. As you can see, we have a very broad reach, and I truly believe that as women in the community, we go beyond the boundaries of our own function, our own company, and we can have a lot of influence across many different cities, many different continents, and many different companies, and that is called influence. And no one knows more about influence than our guest that I would love to introduce now, Arianna Huffington. Arianna probably needs no introduction. Probably nobody in this room and nobody on telepresence that doesn't know Arianna. So rather than read her bio, I thought I would share a couple of stories, personal anecdotes about Arianna. She's a really good friend of mine. But the first time I met Arianna was almost 8 years ago, I think. I was still at Motorola. I was EVP and CTO at Motorola, and we met at the Fortune Most Powerful Women's Conference. And Arianna was moderating a panel. It was about technology trends, and the members of the panel, in addition to Arianna, was myself, Marissa Mayer, who was at the time at Google, now she's the CEO of Yahoo, and Mary Meeker, who's now at Kleiner. So it was like a power panel, we were all techies, and Arianna was moderating, and we met the night before to prepare for the panel because we hadn't met each other before. So Arianna comes up, and she's all like beautiful as she always is. I was like running around with pulling my hair out in jeans and sneakers. And she comes, she's very calm, and she says, I have a question for you. So I thought she's going to ask me about mobile trends, how many subscribers does the mobile industry have worldwide? And she says, how many hours do you sleep every day? So I was like, what? I thought she got the wrong questions. And so I said, there's like 5 billion mobile subscribers around there. She goes, yeah, but how many hours do you sleep every day? She was serious. So I said, I don't know, like 7 hours. She said, really? You sleep 7 hours? You're my role model. And there is a lot of meaning behind that question that she will talk about in her talk, and that's how I first met Arianna. And we became really good friends, and she always talks about the importance of having other ways to measure success. And she refers to this as the third metric for success. In addition to power and money, how else can we define success? My second story about Arianna is more recent. And this was maybe last year. I got an email from her saying, hey, I'm getting a group of few thought leaders for a small, intimate gathering at my home in New York. And we want to brainstorm ideas around this third metric idea, the concept that I have, and I would love to have you participate. And if you know my calendar, you know how difficult it is to coordinate this, and Kathy's laughing because she does help me with my calendar. and it was in New York. So I said, oh, I'd love to be there. I love what she's doing. I really believe in this idea, and it's an intimate dinner, so I can try to fit that in. Luckily for me, we were having our partner summit at Cisco in Boston. So I said, I can finish Partner Summit, short flight to New York. I can just go and do this event. So I did that. I left Partner Summit, flew to New York. I stayed, and I show up, and just casually dressed, intimate event at her home in Soho. I walk in, and there's 300 people there. She's a gorgeous home. So this is Arianna's idea of intimate. She's got big ideas, warm heart, welcomed her home to 300 people. It was the most fun event I ever attended. So with that, I would love to invite Arianna up here.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. Thank you. One thing that you know, but not everybody here knows, is that I don't give a speech anywhere in the world without mentioning Padma as my role model. Because what is interesting about that story, and in fact, I was at an event in Yellowstone over the weekend. Marisa Mayer and I were reminiscing about the same panel, where remember we asked everybody to wear jeans so that we could be casual. But what was interesting was that this was a year before I collapsed from sleep deprivation exhaustion. So it was almost as if subconsciously I was asking you if there is another way to do life and to do accomplishment. And you've showed us the way, so thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you and with all of you here and with all of you remote. Thank you so much.
All right, I will leave the stage to you, and I'll come back. Thank you.
So first of all, how great to have a group coming together to support other women and to have some men here supporting women. Because as Madeleine Albright famously said, there is a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. And there is a special place in heaven for men who support women. So I love the fact that Padma introduced me with this story, because my life began to change a year after that panel when I collapsed, hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone, got 4 stitches on my right eye. And that started me on this journey of asking myself these fundamental questions that we often forget to ask after we leave college, like what is success, or what Greek philosophers used to say, what is a good life? Because unfortunately, what has happened over the last couple of centuries is that the idea of a good life has shrunk down to 2 metrics, money and power, / fame, status, etc. And in fact, trying to live life that way is like trying to sit on a 2-legged stool. Sooner or later, you fall off. And more people, very successful, accomplished people, are falling off. In fact, I just did a blog post on HuffPost because accidentally I found out that if you type who I am on Google, the autocomplete that comes up immediately is, why am I so tired? And the second most common autocomplete is, why am I always tired? And that is deeply sad, that being tired has become the new normal. And what is amazing about this time, and that's why I wanted to put all that together in Thrive, I see many of you have the book in front of you, is that people's personal journeys, like my own experience, is coinciding with amazing new scientific findings that show that, in fact, we have all been living under the collective delusion that burnout is the only way to succeed. And this is a delusion. It is completely and utterly untrue. And now we see more and more athletes, for example, integrating sleep, napping, yoga, meditation into their daily practice because they want to have an edge at winning. Exactly contrary to the whole corporate culture, which is about congratulating people for working 24/7, which is like congratulating somebody for coming to work drunk. Or pretending that you're always on, or actually worse, being always on, which is a recipe for burnout. So we are now at this amazing transition, this amazing tipping point, when everything is changing. But like all transitions, it's messy, because you see everything coexisting. You see more and more companies like Cisco, where you have nap chairs and where you have breastfeeding rooms and where you actually encourage people to tap into their own creativity and ability to innovate. And you also have other companies where people are truly rewarded for being available 24/7. So during this transition, my hope is that women will lead the way. And that's what I call the third feminist revolution. The first feminist revolution was about giving us the vote. The second about giving us access to all jobs and the top of every field. And this is still an incomplete revolution. We all know that. We have a way to go. But I don't believe we're going to get there without the third feminist revolution. Because what that is basically saying we don't want just to be at the top of the world. We want to change the world. Because the way the world is designed right now by men, though not by any of the good men present here, is not working. It's not working for women, it's not working for men, and it is certainly not working for polar bears. But unfortunately, young women, I have two daughters who just recently graduated from college, don't have a lot of visible role models. Because they look around and they see Hillary Clinton, for example, one of the greatest women's role models, collapsing from exhaustion and hitting her head and getting a brain aneurysm and a clot. And we think somehow this is normal? Why does this happen to accomplished people? The truth is it doesn't. And that's why wherever I go, I tell Padma's story. I said, Padma, and you know it, but I'll tell you what I say to other people who don't know her. I say Padma is the Chief Technology Officer of Cisco. She oversees thousands of people. She sleeps for 8 hours a night, most of the time. She meditates, she writes haikus, she paints, and she does a regular digital detox. And people gasp. So if she can do it, surely we can all do it. There is absolutely no trade-off between taking care of ourselves, which is really taking care of our foundational capital, and achievement. On the contrary. And that's why we need more role models, so that young women and the rest of us can see it can be done. I was watching recently an interview that Andy Murray, the tennis player, did with Charlie Rose. And he told Charlie Rose that when he's recharged and refueled, it's as though the ball is coming at him in slow motion. And I thought this was a great metaphor for life. Because when we are sleep deprived and running on empty, it's as though everything is coming at us all at once. It's overwhelming. And therefore, we overreact to things. But to be realistic, our culture at the moment is addicted to the wrong way of living and working, addicted to burnout, and kind of addicted to stress. The cost is enormous, over $300 billion a year in the States alone. It's the same all around the world. The Huffington Post in 11 countries now. In every country we go, we do a study of these issues. It's everywhere. Worse is South Korea, where 40 people commit suicide a day from stress. But more and more people, and often with women leading, are reviewing what is happening. In Germany, for example, Ursula von der Leyen, who is now the first woman defense minister in Germany, when she was the labor minister, did a study of the impact of burnout on German GDP, and she found how many billions of euros Germany was losing. So she encouraged German companies to deal with the problem. And Volkswagen came up with the idea of giving middle managers phones, company phones, that are automatically turned off at 6 p.m. and turned on at 7 a.m. So what I love is that every company, every country, every individual is going to chart their own path forward. But what is interesting about 2013 is that CEOs started coming out of the closet, not as being gay, but as being meditators. Ray Dalio, who founded the biggest global multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, came out last year and said, I have been meditating for 45 years. I consider it the foundation of my success. And I led a session on these themes in Yellowstone over the weekend, which was off the record, but I can tell you that I asked Ray Dalio to lead the meditation, because this was a group of hardcore, A-type, mostly men, business people, and it was great to have Ray lead that meditation. For 15 minutes, there was absolute stillness in the room. And when we talk about meditation, you can use any word you want. If your word is prayer or contemplation, or if you're a Quaker and you talk about quiet time, it doesn't matter. We are all talking about the same thing, disconnecting from our endless activity and our endless devices and reconnecting with ourselves. I know the theme of today is connect intellectually, and I love that. But I also believe in disconnecting in order to reconnect intellectually more effectively. Because if we stay connected all the time, we burn out. Pascal Chabot, the Belgian philosopher, called burnout the disease of civilization. And what is so interesting is that going back to Gladstone, when he was Prime Minister of England, people had that wisdom. He said once, and I love this, he said, I pray every day for 1 hour, except when I'm very busy, when I pray for 2. So my hope with writing Thrive and speaking and writing about these things and making them central to HuffPost editorial priorities is that we will move from simply agreeing intellectually to actually introducing microscopic little changes in our own lives that transform the way we live and work. And that's why in Thrive, I have included 12 steps. And I deliberately picked 12 steps because we are addicted. And at the end of each section, there are 4 main sections to correspond with the 4 pillars of the third metric, starting with well-being, then wisdom, wonder, and giving. So at the end of each section, there are 3 little steps. And you can pick which step you want to start with. Now, I know there are a lot of A-type, hyperachieving women and men here. So don't start with all 12 steps. Just start with one that most resonates, and then keep adding them, and make it super easy. I started with one of the steps I recommend at the end of the well-being chapter, and that was sleep. I went from getting 4 to 5 hours sleep to getting 7 to 8 hours sleep, and it was transformational. I really can't say enough about it. It's the miracle drug. And now hardly a day passes by without more research, and I have 55 pages of scientific endnotes at the end of Thrive, more research showing that sleep is essential in strengthening our immune system, improving our health, our mental clarity, our productivity, and our creativity. And then what happens if you start by adding, let's say, 30 minutes to what you're getting now? Make it realistic. Everybody can add 30 minutes of sleep. It may mean not binge-watching House of Cards one night. And that's why I highly recommend getting a Thrive buddy. Like, in AA you have sponsors. Getting a sponsor. So let's say if you are tempted to binge-watch House of Cards or Breaking Bad or whatever, you call your Thrive buddy and they talk you down. In the wisdom section, which is really about how do we reconnect to our own wisdom. You know, every philosophy, every religion, and many scientists basically in different words say the same thing. We all have in us a place of wisdom, strength, and peace that is as accessible to us as our next breath. But most of the time, we don't live there. We are disconnected from that place. And nobody lives there all the time. So the question is, how quickly can we course correct in the course of the day? When we veer off, how quickly can we get back into that place? And one of the little steps that I recommend here is very simple and very hard at the same time. And it is, at the end of each day, pick a time when you turn off all your devices and gently escort them out of your bedroom. So that if you wake up in the middle of the night, as many of us do, you're not going to be tempted to look at your data when your smartphone is by your bed. And if your excuse that you need your phone to wake you up, first of all, Professor Rothenberg, one of the great sleep researchers at the University of Munich in Germany, has said that you know you have gotten enough sleep when you wake up without an alarm. You can overeat, but you cannot oversleep. And it's just a wonderful feeling, waking up when you've had enough sleep. But anyway, if you still need an alarm clock, Pottery Barn. Great vintage-looking alarm clock, $32. I gave it to all my friends for Christmas presents. There are a lot of excuses, but you'll have an answer for each of the excuses in Thrive, I promise, because I came up with all these excuses myself, so I know what they are. My bedroom now is a sanctuary-free, device-free zone, which means I read real books in bed and nothing to do with work. I read poetry, philosophy, novels, just something to transition me out of my day life into my night life. And it's important to remember that the world will keep sending us screeching messages to keep doing more, to keep going through our to-do list, to keep basically putting our life on hold until we complete the next project or the next item on our list. And that's when we need to realize, as Ian Thomas said, that's one of my favorite quotes. Let me just recite it to you. He said, "The world every day will grab you by the hand and tell you, this is important, and this is important, and this is important. You must worry about this, and you must worry about that, and you must worry about the other. And you must grab your hand back and put it on your heart and say, no, this is important." Which takes us to the wonder section. So often we're so busy multitasking, which incidentally science now proves doesn't exist. It's actually task switching, and it's the most stressful thing you can do. But we are all so busy, either being buried in our thoughts or buried in our smartphones, that we miss a lot of life. I live in New York, and when I stopped walking around, being on the phone, or worse, texting while walking, I suddenly started noticing things that I had completely missed. I remember walking by a building near my apartment and saying to a friend, "This is so beautiful. Look at the ornamentation at the top. When did it go up?" And she said, 1890. And then, of course, there is the voice in our heads that I call the obnoxious roommate living in my head, which is the voice that constantly puts us down, judges us, and can never be in the present. Have you noticed? This voice is either judging what we did or worrying about what's going to happen. Montaigne, the French philosopher, said, "There were many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened." And so it's really important to learn to silence that voice. And the way I learned to silence that voice, so now she only makes guest appearances, is by basically recognizing that this voice is not me, And this voice is not the truth. So it doesn't matter what the voice says. It's not who we are. That is really the key thing to recognize. And a little step here that helped me a lot, one of the 3 steps at the end of the wonder section, is at the end of each day, pick something you no longer need. It can be resentment, a grudge, which, as Carrie Fisher said, resentment is the poison you drink thinking the other person is going to die. Or a project that you've started in your head but you're not really going to complete, or even start in life and drop it. I discovered the power of actually completing a project by dropping it. Let me explain what I mean by that. I mean, one of the projects that I had on my list, one of the things I wanted to do was learn to become a good skier. I am a lousy skier, and my daughters love to ski. And then one day I realized, you know what, I will never invest enough time and energy into becoming a good skier. So as far as I'm concerned, skiing is done. I completed this project by dropping it. And now when we go skiing, I sit by the fire, I read a good book and drink hot chocolate. And I feel completely done. And that way you it's like you clean up your mental hard drive. And you can really focus on the things that you are really going to invest energy and time into. The 4th section is giving, the 4th pillar of the 3rd metric. And that's why I'm so glad to see how much you're doing here at Cisco around giving, around helping the community, around volunteering, and how encouraged this is around the company. Because that's really how you integrate purpose into your life and into the life of the company. And giving doesn't just mean leaving your job and your family and going to Rwanda to start an orphanage. It can be very small and very day-to-day. My book is dedicated to my mother, and my mother, even when we had no money, I was brought up in a 1-room apartment in Athens, Greece, with no money. My mother and my sister, my father had left. Because when my mother complained about his philandering, he told her not to interfere in his private life. That didn't go down well. But my mother had the ability to always make us feel that we were bigger than our circumstances. And that we couldn't stop giving because we didn't have any material resources. And one of the things she kept saying is, make sure that anybody you interact during the day, you make a personal connection. And that's one of the steps for me now at the end of the giving chapter. All the people that we so often just take for granted, the cleaning crew in my hotel this morning, or in your office, the checkout clerk at the grocery store, the barista in the coffee shop. When we make personal connections, our life changes because we re-engage with the full humanity around us and with our own full humanity. And what is interesting also is to see how more and more people now are beginning to use their creativity and their talents to give back. They may not be able to make a living from them, but they can use them to help others. I mean, I love the story, for example, of the Threshold choirs. These are people who love to sing, but were never able to make a living from singing. So they've now created these choirs, and they go to hospitals and hospices, and they sing to people who are sick or dying. And apparently, hearing is the last sense that goes when people are ready to die. And so this is really the kind of amazing way of including what you love and giving back to others, which fulfills life in a way that nothing else does. Just narcissistically pursuing the first 2 metrics will never give us that sense of fulfillment that including the 3rd and including especially the metric of giving can add to our lives. So let me sort of wrap all this up before we go to our panel by saying that if we're lucky, we have 30,000 days to play the game of life. How we play depends on what we value. And if we only value money and power, we'll never have enough. There's always somebody who has more. And there's nothing worse than the comparison game, because that really goes against the fact that each one of us is unique. And if you've been to a memorial service recently, you realize that our eulogies have nothing to do with our LinkedIn profiles. Have you ever heard anybody eulogize by saying, you know what, Mary was amazing. She increased market share by 1/3. So when we remember that, we also realize that we have an incredible abundance in us that is not dependent on whether we meet our next goal. We all talk a lot about networking in these events. And I've discovered that the best way to network is to walk into a room and look around and say, what can I give this person, instead of what can I take from that person? Also, when you approach people from the point of view of what can you take from them, what happens is that you are always operating in a state of lack, like you don't have enough. And the truth is that inside us, we have everything we need. And from that place, we can create whatever we want. But it's a very different place from which to create, because it basically helps us understand that we are always going to be more than our jobs. I was on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday show recently, and she asks everybody the same question: what do you know for sure? And I said, well, what I know for sure is that however magnificent your job, Oprah, may be, or however great my job may be, or however great anybody's job may be, who we are in our essence as human beings is more magnificent. And that is really the paradox. It's really recognizing that when we take care of ourselves, which is really like following the ground rule on aeroplanes, put your own oxygen mask first. You know, this is not an indulgence. This is not a luxury, and this is not what they used to call in the 80s for women me time. When we do that, we are going to be more effective at our jobs at the same time that we realize that we are more than our jobs. We are never going to be just defined by our jobs, however great they are. That's when we shrink. That's when we miss out the magnificence of our full humanity. And, you know, I love Indra, and I was there in Aspen when she said that, and she's amazing. But I have to politely disagree with the idea that you can't be a super successful woman, CEO of a big company, and make your 9 a.m. Meeting at school if you want to. I don't want anybody to feel guilty if they miss it, because guilt is the worst thing for working mothers. It's like, in fact, I think that when they take the baby out, they put the guilt in. So I don't want anybody to feel guilty if they miss the 9 o'clock meeting, but I don't want anybody to feel that they can't make the 9 o'clock meeting, because that's how the world is changing. You know, we don't have to work 9 to 7. We can pick our own times. It's all going to be increasingly about delivering on projects. It's not going to be about how many hours are you at your desk. And more companies are realizing that we pay employees for their judgment, their ideas, their creativity, not their stamina. And it's changing. And that's why I'm so excited about this conversation and how it is becoming global, because if women like you in this room and you all around the world participating today actually begin to make these changes in your own lives, in your own teams, we can accelerate a global shift that's already happening. The shift is already happening. But why not accelerate it so that we don't have millions more women and men have the painful wake-up calls that I had, or much worse? And that's why what I want to invite you to do is to share your stories on the Huffington Post and on LinkedIn, and put them anywhere you want. It's not about exclusivity. It's about huge distribution platforms. HuffPost now has 95 million unique visitors, and we translate all the best stuff in 11 languages. And we have this global conversation, and we are amazed by the number of women and men who write and say, you know, I learned from your story. Why should you have your own painful wake-up call? You can learn from mine. And other women and men can learn from yours. So to make this super easy, I'm going to give you my email address. And you can bypass the Huffington Post bureaucracy and send anything you want to write. It could be about your own burnout or wake-up call, or it could be about how you thrive and what you've introduced in your life that makes it easier to thrive while accomplishing and succeeding. And my email address is arianna@huffingtonpost.com. Very easy. That's one good thing about founding a company. You get a good email address. So my compatriot, Archimedes, the Greek mathematician, said, give me a place to stand and I can move the world. So when we tap into that place in us of wisdom, strength, and peace, that place of resilience and creativity and wisdom, we will be able to truly transform the world. And we'll be able to do it with more grace, more joy, more gratitude, and yes, more sleep. Thank you.
Arianna will take some questions from you guys now, and then we'll come back as a panel. So any specific questions for Arianna on what she talked about, raise your hand. We have people on the mic.
And while you're coming to the mic, let me just introduce our editor, Riddhi Shah, who is here. Riddhi, where are you? Can you stand over there? Riddhi. And Riddhi is actually overseeing the project that we have been doing, the Huffington Post has been doing in partnership with Cisco called Impact X. This is our 3rd year together. And I think Marianne is here, who is overseeing. Marianne, would you stand? Who is overseeing it on the Cisco side. So thank you so much. We are loving it. And anybody who wants to blog on the Huffington Post or write about any of these issues, please talk to Riddhi. And of course, Marianne knows everybody at HuffPost and can facilitate anything. And so where's the first question? Yes.
First, thank you for speaking to us today. It was awesome. In an earlier session this morning, we were talking about non-negotiables, and I was wondering what yours are, besides sleep, what your non-negotiables are in your life, your day-to-day activities.
So I would say my first non-negotiable at work is no brilliant jerks allowed. So I don't care how brilliant or fabulous anybody is. If they're a jerk and toxic, I don't want them. And I think that changes the whole culture around us, and the message is communicated to everybody. And I feel it's so important to create a culture which makes everybody know that they are valued as human beings and not just as robots producing things. Which is why at HuffPost, you know, we have our nap rooms, we have our meditation, yoga, breathing classes, and we have instituted an email policy, which makes it clear that when you're off work, you're not expected to be on email. We say if there's something urgent, we'll reach you, we'll call you, we'll text you. But otherwise, people need predictable time off. So I think the combination of these two things, I suppose, are my non-negotiable at work.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm actually an investment banker, so lack of sleep and always on is kind of the nature of the industry. And I'm wondering what kind of advice you would have for people who are starting off in their careers. We can't necessarily change the world or like the culture of things, but how do we define these boundaries and I guess in a way still be able to succeed, but also protect our health, for instance?
Great question. So first of all, let me just say that everything I have said is not the prerogative of people who've already succeeded. I think these need to be implemented at any stage because, in fact, you're going to be much more effective at any stage in your career if you take care of your human capital. And I'll tell you a little story. I was in London recently for the publication of Thrive, and my godson, I have an English godson, gave me a book party with all his young 20-something friends. And there were two young women there who had just graduated from Oxford. They had their first job at McKinsey, but they wanted to do it differently. And they went to their boss and they said, we're going to work really hard. We'll do a great job during the week. We are off email over the weekends. If you need us and it's something urgent, here is our cell phone, which was a very daring thing to do in that industry, right? It goes right against the grain. But they had a lot of offers. They felt they wanted to set their own boundaries and do it their own way. And 3 months later, their boss's boss came to them and said, you have been identified as leaders in the company because of what you did. It shows a level of self-confidence and a level of knowing your value that actually had an impact in how they were perceived at work. You know how we tell women, know your value, negotiate for your salary, don't accept whatever they give you. Well, we now need to extend that to say, know your value. You're not going to be always on. And also, if you're always on, you're not going to be really good at your job. And I was recently speaking at JP Morgan, and Kelly Goff, who is the woman, head of private banking at JP Morgan. And I met afterwards, and she told me privately, but then I asked her to write about it, and she did on HuffPost. She said everything is changing in her life because the week before I spoke, a colleague and friend of hers died unexpectedly of pancreatic cancer, leaving young children. And the same week, a 14-year-old classmate and friend of her daughter's at school in New York committed suicide. And she said, I've taken their pictures and I've put them on my mirror so I see them every morning to be able to put everything in perspective. So I think wherever you are in your career and your life, whether at the beginning or at any level, being able to bring perspective to what we value and standing up for what is important to us is really key. And there is a new listening now. Even investment banks have put out new guidelines saying, take the occasional weekend off, which sounds extraordinary, but at least it shows there is the beginning of a shift.
Arianna, thank you so much for coming here and giving us this talk. I'm here on the side.
Hi.
So I really enjoyed what you said. I don't have a question, but I wanted to tell everybody, I also had that painful wake-up call myself, and I blogged about it. There are two major incidents happened in my life which changed my life, and I am doing meditation for past 9 years and wonderful experiences. And I spoke about how to remain easy while being busy. And I'm writing my book autobiography right now. And it's such an important discovery I made myself. And it was kind of the same thoughts what you shared. When, empty pots only can be filled. And when you are seeking, when you're asking somebody, you are empty. But when you start giving, you fill yourself up. So when I was writing that autobiography, very nice experience. I would encourage everybody to do that. And, like that painful discovery, I will just take 1 minute and share with everybody. I had my husband go through the major heart attack incident, and with few minutes of delay, he could have lost his position, possession, bank balance, kids, car, everything. And then I had that realization, I'm saying, my husband, is he mine? He would have left me, right? So what would I take with me? Because even I need to leave my body sooner or later, right? You talked about what do I know for sure? I know for sure I need to leave this body sooner or later. So what am I going to take with me? that legacy, footprint, my good karma. So it changed my life tremendously, and I'm helping as many women as I can and men, by sharing my experiences, writing one positive thought every day. I start my day with positivity. And you talked about that transition during night, right? So reflect back and, sleep with that positive thought. You will have wonderful sleep. You will be energized for the next day. So thank you very much for coming here and giving us small tips which will make a huge difference. And somebody was asking, the self-transformation. Yes, we cannot change the whole world, but start with you. That self-transformation, if each of us take care of ourselves, self-transformation will bring world transformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story.
We have many questions on TP. RTP, can you please ask your question?
Oh, okay, great.
Hi there. Thank you, Arianna, so much. We have a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first one is, these philosophies that you've shared for the third metric are incredible and very powerful, but not everyone gets it immediately. Do you have any advice for bringing those brilliant jerks or anyone else who doesn't immediately see the value of the philosophies to bring them to awareness?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. Like in any period of transition, there are the early adopters, there are the people who follow, and they are going to be the ones who adopt it last. But all we need for a true transformation is a critical mass. So every person who makes these small changes in their lives makes it easier for us to get to critical mass. And what is amazing about that is that we begin to manifest it in our lives. And so people sense it. I know that people sense that I'm leading differently. Or anybody at HuffPost, anybody I work with, is different when they actually practice these things. They don't overreact, don't take things as personally. So that radiates to others. And you're right, there will be people who are not ready to listen, who are not ready to accept. But you're going to be surprised by how many people are actually ready and how much difference it makes when we begin to implement these things in our own lives. And I've been reading a lot, and I have a lot of quotes in the book from Stoic philosophers. And one of my favorites, the two people I quote most in my speeches are Padma and Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was almost as powerful as Padma. He was the emperor of Rome. And a Stoic philosopher. And every night he would go to bed, wherever he was, often out in his tent, fighting a war or dealing with plague that had broken out in the Roman Empire. He had almost as many problems as Padma. And he would write a book that now became Meditations. And it's a beautiful book. I highly recommend. Although there are many different translations, make sure you get a good one. If you don't know which it is, ask me. And he basically, one of the favorite things he said is, whatever happens in life, the biggest adversities, challenges, they have a hidden blessing in them. And it's really important to remember that. Life is not going to be a series of triumphs, conquests, everything going well. So when we see the hidden blessing in the challenge, in the adversity, that's when life is transformed. And Rumi, my favorite poet, put it even more succinctly. He said, live life as though everything is rigged in your favor, no matter what happens. And you're very young, but when you're going to look back in your life, you'll see often things that were the most painful, the biggest heartbreaks, ended up being exactly what was needed to get us to the next point in our lives. I often tell this story of how I was in love with a man in England who was twice my age and half my size, but love is blind. And we were together for 7 years, but he didn't want to have children. He didn't want to get married, and I knew for sure I wanted to have children. So in order to actually leave him, I left London. I moved to New York, and I didn't trust myself to leave him and stay in London. And everything that happened in my life, you know, my children, the Huffington Post, being here with you, everything good that happened to me happened because a man wouldn't marry me. So I say, just remember that, because you never know where something is going to lead you to.
To be true in my life. We do have one other quick question over here. Do you want to go ahead and ask it? No? Okay. Do you consider exercise a form of meditation? If you're disconnected and you don't have your cell phone with you, can that be, if you go for a run, can that be considered meditation?
I actually write about that in the book, because a lot of people say jogging is my meditation, or fly fishing is my meditation, or scuba diving is my meditation. And first of all, I think these are great activities. Anything you can do which requires your full attention, requires you not being tied to your smartphone is fantastic. But there is something about meditation that actually is available to you once you practice it enough, no matter where you are or what you do. You don't have to put your running shoes on. You don't have to put your scuba diving gear on. And I think it's great to have something in life that you can immediately connect with, and that it can actually restore you under any circumstances. And now, of course, if you look at the science around meditation, it's truly stunning, because it actually changes the brain. It changes the plasticity of the brain. Richard Davidson, the neuroscientist from the University of Wisconsin, has worked with the Dalai Lama and has studied hundreds of Buddhist monks, literally by putting hundreds of sensors on the brains and MRIs, etc., and has demonstrated all the changes in the neofrontal cortex, in the gray matter of the brain, that slow down aging, that reduce the chance of Alzheimer's, not to mention improve productivity and creativity. And so in that sense, they bring different qualities to our lives, both important but different qualities.
Good morning, Arianna. This will be the last question for the section. The question I have for you is, we talk about the concept of burnout in careers and in our day-to-day lives, but I see it happening much earlier in the middle school and high school years. What are your thoughts on getting a tipping point in the education system? Because I think that's where the burnout characteristics start.
Yes, absolutely. And I saw that with both my daughters. I think we are now at the moment putting so much on our children. You know, our children are so overscheduled. There was a funny New Yorker cartoon recently that had the little girl say, "I'm in timeout, my favorite time of the day." It's the only... And at HuffPost, we had a blogger, a special ed teacher, who wrote a post, I don't know if many of you read it, called "The Day I Stopped Saying Hurry Up to My Daughter." And it just really went crazy viral. You know, she had 1 million Facebook likes. It was read by 6 million people. She was on the Today Show. She's writing a book about it. And I think what happened is that people resonated with her story, which was that I have a 6-year-old daughter, the person I adore more than anything in the world. And I realized that the 2 words I speak to this child more often than anything else are hurry up and get up, hurry up and have breakfast, hurry up and go to school. And even people who didn't have children resonated with that, because that's what we do to ourselves. We are constantly hurrying ourselves. We are living in what has been called perpetual time famine. And if you ask people in survey after survey what they want more than anything, more than their families, more than their jobs, they will tell you time. And yet we can dramatically change our attitude and our relationship to time simply by being present in the moment. And that's what we need to cultivate to our children from a very early age, especially because of all the prevalence of screens. We have a section on HuffPost called Screen Sense, about how to navigate screens in our children's lives, because it is truly stunning. how many children now gravitate to their screens more to their more than to their friends or their parents. So changing that and changing the amount of stress about getting into college, the amount of stress in college, which has led to all the binge drinking that we're seeing and an epidemic of addiction. Again, I write about my own painful experience with my oldest daughter, who was 4 months away from graduating from Yale. And I got the call that every parent dreads, Mommy, I can't breathe. In her last semester at Yale, she had gotten involved in drugs. And, that drive from New York to New Haven to pick her up in an emergency room was one of the hardest of my life. But it made me sort of study what was happening in colleges and to see the amount of stress and mental health problems that we're not sufficiently discussing. And I'm happy to say she's been sober now for 2.5 years. And in a sense, looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened because it allowed her to deal with a lot of issues that she had not dealt with that will be incredibly helpful in the rest of her life. But it definitely brought me face to face with the impact that stress is having among millennials.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you. Let's give her another big round of applause for. So we are going to go to a panel discussion now with both our guests. I'd like to invite Elizabeth Will to join us back up here. So for those of you that have not been here for the whole session from this morning, I'll just quickly summarize some of the key messages that I heard when Elizabeth was talking. For those of you that have joined us later, Elizabeth, as you know, is a partner currently at Andreessen Horowitz, previously at Twitter, and before that at IVP and Menlo Ventures. She's an ultra-marathon runner and a huge athlete, and she also does letterpress and has a company called Paper Wheel where she creates amazing, amazing pieces of art, I call it. And you heard from Arianna and her emphasis around third metric and how we all have to not only define but embrace and also respect that there is another way to measure success besides power and money and going through a checklist. And I think this not only is for ourselves, but as leaders and managers, as you are recruiting people, keep that in mind in how you're evaluating people, even at the job. And one of the things that I do, I meet with a lot of our folks, big company, we have over 60,000 employees. We have a lot of interns that come join us during the summer. We have a lot of new employees. Wherever I travel, and I travel to different sites, I do chat sessions with 10, 15 people from Cisco. And when I do that, typically I go around the room and we all ask people to introduce themselves. And one of the things that I noticed is as I was doing that, people usually will introduce themselves with a job title. I'm a product manager. I am a software engineer working on the Catalyst switch. I'm a video decoder, et cetera. And it's a very robotic, mechanical way of describing who we are. And I realized I do that too. I say I'm Padmasree Warrior. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Cisco. There is a lot more to each of us. So I've now started doing something very different. As we go around the room, I tell people I don't want to know what you do in your job. I want you to tell me one fun fact about you. In fact, I do this in my all-hands meeting. It's become very competitive now. I actually show for new employees one fact, fun fact, something that they wouldn't normally share in their resume or LinkedIn profile. I discover all kinds of things. People that have biked across the continent. One woman said that she's interested in wine tasting and spin class. I said, well, I hope you're not doing both those together. But it's amazing. And I noticed that as I do that and people talk about what they really love to do, their eyes light up and they keep going and people discover and connect at a much deeper level. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. I encourage all of you to use tricks like this to even in your day-to-day management and how we think about that. And for the person that asked that question about investment banking, I think perhaps sharing a fun fact about yourself with your boss will open a different light, where you can, I don't know what you are passionate about, but it's amazing when people do that. So with that, I want to, I'll ask the members that have joined us a couple of questions, and then we'll go back to all of you for additional questions. So I want to talk about, we talked a lot about work and life and how we kind of blend these things. What about advocacy? Have you guys, as you transitioned through your life or in your career, had people that advocated on your behalf, and have protected you? Because sometimes when we come up with a counterpoint of view, in your case, Arianna, when you came up with the third metric, and for you as an athlete and a business person, people will judge you, right? And it always helps when you have someone else who's advocating on your behalf. Has that played a role in how you were able to overcome your own self-doubts about, should I put this out about myself? Should I share this fact? And have you done that on behalf of other people, but more importantly, other women?
So absolutely. I think advocating for other women and having other women and men advocate for me has been really important. I mean, just to mention one fact, when we launched the Huffington Post, it was met very definitely with mixed reviews, to put it mildly. I have learned one of the most negative reviews by heart. It said the Huffington Post is an unsurvivable failure. It is the movie equivalent of Gigli, Ishtar, and Heaven's Gate all wrong. And I remember that my tribe, I have a group of girlfriends who we consider ourselves each other's tribe, was absolutely indispensable during that time. Because I felt that as long as I believed in it and my tribe believed in it, everything would be okay. So for me, they were my advocates, and you realize that you don't have to have the whole world with you, but you just need, even if it's a tribe of one, somebody who believes in you no matter what.
Great. How about you, Elizabeth?
Interesting thinking through steps in career of bosses and things. I don't think I've had that clear, I've heard from other peers and colleagues and other people I work with that they have that, clear advocate at work and that manager that always championed them. I don't feel like I had advocates in that sense specifically, as much as I would have liked and wished at this point in my career. But to Arianna's point, I feel like I've bolstered myself with that more personal peer group where I've used them as my crutch and more to be my advocate about the sounding board and being that gut check and who do you vent to. So I would say I've used more personal connections to help me get through career hurdles and big life decisions than I have with a clear road unblocker in the professional sense.
I have another question along those lines, though. As you guys have gone through your careers, have you seen leadership behaviors that you feel sometimes derails leaders, where it's someone you were working with, your peer or your boss, and you go like, God, that person does this all the time, and it just upsets me. And you then go back and reflect and say, maybe I'm doing something that's irritating other people. And if so, what would be those derailing behaviors, for people? We have a lot of people that are younger in their careers, thinking through. So what behaviors should they avoid? That either you've seen, you'd say, don't do that ever, and you tell yourself, I'm never going to do that.
I love the fact that one of the themes of today is authentic leadership. Because I really feel the biggest pitfall that I have seen among leaders is those who are not authentic. Those who don't trust themselves enough to really stand up for what they believe, take risks, but who feel that they have to go along with the most powerful person in the room, or often be passive-aggressive as a result. For me, this is kind of the worst trait. The person who will agree with you in front of you and then disagree, or worse, behind you. And I think that probably the worst characteristic, whether it's in leadership or in being a human being generally, is what I call the Iago syndrome. Othello is kind of my favorite Shakespeare play for that reason, because I think the portrait of Iago is just chilling. And also, we all know Iagos, unfortunately, in our lives. And I think that's where we need to have kind of zero tolerance. Like if there's any Iago, the person who is basically going to undermine quietly, they have to be removed gently and, no violence, but firmly. And for me, these are the greatest ways to undermine leadership and to undermine really a full life.
Yeah. And I would come back to sharing credit. I think that's something early through your career you see other people crave and hoard credit in ways, and then that moment that you're given a little piece of the pie for something that you've done, even if it's tiny, how good that feels, and how you can be in any role but still be able to give somebody a shout out or congratulations for contributing. And I think being able to integrate that into more and more ways, at least once a day, you can find ways to really share all the help that you're receiving to get your job done.
That's great. I think one of the things that I absolutely think derails careers is when you don't know the answer and you just try to make up BS. I've seen that happen, and by the way, I've done that too. And I feel like come back to my office like, God, I think I screwed that up. That person totally saw through that. I think there's you have to think on your feet, right? Especially when you're faced with tough situations, you have to be resourceful about thinking about ideas. At the same time, my advice to any level of leaders, at every level, actually we see politicians doing this all the time, just say, I don't know. I need to go research that out, and I'll come back to you. If you don't know the answer, don't try to make up stuff. I think usually people will, even if you're very sophisticated, at spinning things and putting things. And as you grow in your careers and your lives, actually, I call it my BS radar. It goes up. My antenna goes up when I feel like someone's just making up. And that just tells me that person's not authentic or whatever. It's best to just say, I don't know what you're asking me for, but I'll come back to you, and then come back with a full answer and more research. To me, that's something that I have a lot of sensitivity for. And I think, actually all these things, and I'd like to get your perspective on this, sometimes the things we view as strengths and what become weaknesses, there is a fine line, right? We tell people to have points of view, be opinionated, have a point of view, walk into a room. At the same time, you don't want to come across as a leader, as a contributor, to being someone who's very dogmatic, who's stuck in their point of view. So that's a fine balance. And to me, being resourceful, thinking on your feet, and making up BS is also a fine line. So speaking of that, and thinking about being authentic and being a leader where you're seen as this rock of calm in situations of crisis, have you ever had a crisis situation where you really wanted to scream, but you had to stay calm, whether with your child or whether at work, and how did you deal with that?
So I find actually that I had more situations like that with my children.
Get ready for this.
I'm 7 weeks away.
You're 7 weeks away?
I know,
my
just
God. It's so funny because I follow you on Twitter, and I thought she was pregnant. I was thinking that in my head, but she's clearly not pregnant.
This is what being pregnant and being an ultramarathoner looks like.
I'm very glad you clarified that there was this inner dialogue going on all this time. Oh, that is amazing. I find that at work, partly because I've been practicing all these things, I've really gotten to the point where I can deal with things going wrong, and there are things going wrong every day in all our work lives, right? And just kind of process it. Like, I had our editor-in-chief in the UK who resigned to take another job, and she had been there for 3 years. She had built a site, And I found that, I love her, I think she's great, but immediately I kind of knew who to replace her with. I made the decision quickly, I announced it, we had a party for her. I also believe when somebody is leaving, make the transition as fast as possible so that everybody can regroup around the new leadership or the new operation. And it all seemed very effortless in a real way, not like pretend effortless, because as you said, sometimes you may want to scream, but you won't scream. So that really for me has been much more easy to navigate relatively recently. With my children, I think there is something, partly I think it's the guilt, like would this not have happened if I had made every 9 a.m. Coffee clutch, or if I had actually baked the cookies rather than bought them. You go through all this questioning, and that has been harder.
That's great. How about you, Elizabeth?
For me, I would say, prepare for those situations in the sense that I've identified when I'm most uncomfortable. And I know for me, and identifying that stage of when you get really uncomfortable with a problem, and when you want to scream. I know it's that minute when I'm asked to do something and I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get to that point. And in theory that you can do it, but you're just so almost stunned with there's so many options, or I don't know if I have that exact skill set, or who am I going to call? But you can figure it out. And I know for me, that's when I'm most uncomfortable. And then I just need time. I either need a night's sleep, or I need to not be in the frantic state that I was in. And if I just give that a little bit of time, like any problem is addressable, and you will be armed with it, and you can get it done. So I think preparing for those personal situations where when you're at your lowest, and that what is the solution to get you there. And for me, it's just a good night's sleep and face it in the morning.
Great. I'm going to go to questions, so get ready with your questions, and if I can have the mics already in place. If you have a question, raise your hand, and somebody will bring a mic. And while they're doing that, one of the things that, Arianna talked a lot about meditating. I do meditate every day. I've been doing it now for over 23 years. And I meditate every night now for 20-25 minutes. And that is sort of, for me, a transition point from being really busy doing many tasks to stopping and just kind of resting. I read a book or read poetry. I write haikus, so that's a time when I may go write a haiku or something like that. And I think it really helps me, and I want to share this story with you guys. I started meditating. I am still, I have an A personality. I'm one of those people that has a long list of things that I feel like I have to do all at once. And I was like that throughout my life and my career. And when my son was born, he was about a year old when I lost my mom. And she died very suddenly, and all of a sudden I had this really busy, very demanding career. I was a operations lead. I was running a factory. By definition, my job was to lead operations 24/7. So I had people running the factory 7 days a week, 24 hours, and that was actually in my job description, was to keep operations 24/7. I had an infant son and someone who I was very close to. My mom was in India. I lost her, and it just was too much, and I didn't really know how to deal with that. So I just used to just go find a quiet spot in the room and pause and take deep breaths for a few seconds. And I realized actually that was really helping me. And that's kind of how I started to meditate. In the beginning, I couldn't sit still for more than 2 minutes. So I started off meditating for 2 minutes, then 5 minutes. And, I sometimes joke it took me 23 years to get to 25 minutes. But I think, as Arianna said, I do that now. I travel, as you guys know, all over the world for Cisco. I just, at the end of the day, go to my hotel room. I just need quiet time. I sometimes meditate right before I go on stage, before to do my keynote. I just find a quiet spot and sit for a couple of minutes. So it is somewhat different from running. I think, you can meditate even for a short period of time. John Chambers, my boss, always jokes, if he's really stressed out or having a bad day, he'll come in my office, close the door, and go, because I tell him, okay, take a deep breath. That's meditating. I think sometimes just pausing and being still really helps. So I think it's not something you feel like, I can't do this at work, or there has to be some meditation room we go to. I mean, I do this to my team too. By the way, Susan is across the hall from me, so she's my, if I want to scream, I go in her office and close the door. And she looks at me, and I just go, okay, I'm good now, and then I leave. So you can do that too. And, so I just want to encourage all of you to kind of don't think of this as some kind of a textbook way of meditation. I think there's other ways. It's just like going to that place of being calm and being silent allows us to all think differently. All right, now I think we're ready. I was kind of filling time as we go for questions. First question.
Hi. So thank you for taking my second question. First of all, I'm completely starstruck. You can probably tell. And I've read the Hurry Up article, and it brought tears to my eyes. I would encourage everybody to read it. I stopped saying hurry up in the summer. I've made that commitment to my son that I will not say hurry up in the summer. So he's allowed to get up at 10, and he gets to go to camp at 11. It doesn't matter. So my question to you is kind of tangential to that, though. I am in my mid-career, you could say, and I'd like your advice on how to handle situations where age is an issue. And I see that a lot in the Bay Area, not in Cisco, big disclaimer, not in Cisco. But whenever I go out, when I talk to friends, when I talk to other friends at startups, pretty much everyone has this feeling that a woman who's over 35 can't really be hired in a startup. And I've actually had a personal experience too, and I don't want to name the company, but I've actually had a personal experience. So I would like your advice on how to actually deal with situations like that. How would you respond to something like that when you know that it's not really even overt, it's just there? It's like the big elephant in the room. Thank you.
I think there's definitely something about American culture, not just startup Silicon Valley culture, which basically does not sufficiently revere the advantages of aging. I come from a Greek culture where aging is truly revered, because the idea is that as you get older, you get wiser. And therefore, you have more wisdom to give to your family, your company, your community. In fact, if you go to a Greek monastery, the abbot or the abbotess are called Geronda or Gerondissa, which literally means old man and old woman. Old man and old woman are terms of respect. And in fact, that's why Rita Wilson, the actress who is also Greek, and I launched together HuffPost 50 at the Huffington Post, which is for women and men over 50 who are reinventing their careers. And we just are now in the middle of 50 over 50, doing a series with the Today Show about 50 amazing women over 50 and how they are leading their lives. As increasingly, as we are seeing that there is no particular age when you can start something or start something new. I mean, I launched the Huffington Post in 2005, sorry, how you forget? It's like childbirth. It doesn't feel as painful anymore. When I was 55 years old, I also believe it's very important for women never to hide their age. I just had my 64th birthday.
I know, she tweeted it. I'm like, are you tweeting your age?
That's awesome. And I really believe that there's a shift happening, and you need to be part of the shift. As we said earlier, not everybody's going to shift at the same rate, but there are enough people shifting that you can actually do what you want at any age now.
Anything else to add, Elizabeth?
I would say play up the benefits of the wisdom that come with the wisdom of 35. But at that point, I think you have so much to offer to a startup, and now working with so many that need that help and support. Just plow in there with it.
You know what I would do? I would turn it into a strength. I would say, look, you're a startup, you have to scale. I've been there, done that. I bring scale and experience. a lot of this is also selling your skill sets, right? If you just say, oh, I've been in the industry for 20 years, people say, oh my God, you're old, you're dated. But at least they say that to me. But if you say, look, I have been through turnarounds. I know how to scale a company, get it to a big company, and I know how to turn projects from moving people out and bringing additional people in. All these kinds of skills that have been there, done that. That's experience. It's also marketing it in a positive way, right?
And I think that. And I do think that the knock comes on it from the theory that you're not relevant anymore. So I think also playing up that you've been current. You're in, yes, you've aged, but you still have the skill set that's needed to get the job done.
Yeah, it's great.
That's
yeah,
what's
being
important.
up on trends, right? Yeah. All right, and next question.
We have a question from TP. New York, can you please ask your question?
Sorry, is that on TP?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead as you start speaking.
This is New York. Jeannie has a question. Jeannie, go ahead, ask your question.
Hello, and thank you so much for hosting this panel and event. I work in finance, and my husband actually works at a tech startup. And my question's around hiring. And I find that oftentimes firms hire for culture, and they want to be able to hire someone who is qualified, but also fits in. And, someone you want to sit next to all day long, because we spend most of our waking hours at the office. And two challenges, I think. One, how do you encourage, or any best practices around getting more women to just apply for these positions? My husband kind of lovingly refers to women in technology as unicorns, because they just don't get enough applicants. And I take great offense to that, but there is an application issue. And then on top of that, how do you change the culture around hiring practices so that you encourage diversity and you encourage people to hire others who just aren't necessarily like them and don't share the same love of football or sports or activities or golf?
Yeah, but
Go ahead. Yeah.
This is something that is very warm and close to my heart after spending the time at Twitter. And I think we were so fortunate at Twitter. I witnessed an amazing culture that was started in the early days, but had the chance to be there at a time to help bolster it and foster it. But one of the things we'd say about our team there is, you go to a meal and you were sitting across, yes, you knew everyone was great at their job, because they were there, but that you assumed everyone was there for a reason. And that person was both good at their job, but then you would be at lunch across from a Rubik's Cube champion or a great tennis player. And bringing out some of those other interests and making them actually part of the fabric of the workplace and part of the talked about things at work, I think help really enrich that culture. And then on the hiring idea, one of the things that I did with hiring panels, and picked this up from, I believe it's Amazon who has this practice, but they have, your traditional interview panel, the people that are going to be most relevant to the job skill or trait that you're being hired for, but that they always put in a bar raiser on that panel, and that person is purely there to see, will this new hire potentially raise the bar at my company? And that means that they're assessing more for culture fit. So that person is there to really not look at, is this person a great engineer, designer, these certain technical skills, but will that person be this robust part of our community and the group there? And I think the more of these bar raisers that you hire into your company, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where these companies are now more marketable to other new hires because they have this great, robust set of interesting people.
I also feel that for me, when we launched the Huffington Post, from a very early age, it was important to look for people who may not have been the people you wanted to have dinner with, but who were people who knew things you didn't know. And that requires a certain degree of humility that is very important in leadership. And I'm now constantly recruiting people who know things I don't know and can teach me and other leaders at HuffPost things. I think that's how you stay current, that's how you integrate all the latest trends, and that's how you never see your company or yourself, for that matter, as as complete. You know, we're all works in progress. And that's really what I think, for me, determines our hiring decisions.
Yeah, I think, it's, I think both ways. I think part of your question was how do you encourage women to apply for these roles and how do you get, more women in the pipeline. And so there, I think all of us can help. We're all here. You're all here because you're successful, you're powerful. I think just building and I'm sure you have networks of women that you're mentoring outside. I think reach out all the way from high school, encourage them to take internships, especially in the tech industry. I think it tends to be a very isolating, very alienating industry because it's typically seen as very analytical, very technical, and I joke about this concept about programmers being you're not really technical if you like fashion. So what? I mean, I want to change that paradigm. I love fashion, and I think I'm extremely technical. I'd love to have someone come challenge me on that. But I think these notions that we push on young girls, I think alienates them. So I think we can all help with that. So that's on the pipeline thing. And I think when you're hiring, looking for a more complete set of accomplishments, and of course domain expertise is important. If you're applying for a technical job or a finance job or something, of course you have to know that field. But what else can you do beyond that? And I think increasingly our world is becoming so multidisciplinary, right? It's not enough if you're just a great technologist. You have to know how do you create a business out of this. It's not enough if you're just a great business person, business development person. You have to understand what are the disruptions going to be. So it's really becoming this blended set of skills. So I think that actually plays to a lot of women's strengths because I do feel women are better at absorbing multiple domains. And obviously, you're not going to be an expert at everything. Becky, our CIO, sitting here, Becky, as you know, runs IT for Cisco, huge job. A lot of it is operational. But she's a great thought leader, and we joke, her office is 2 doors from mine. She always comes in my office and say, okay, I know everybody thinks it's a crazy idea, but I'm going to share this with you. And she'll go off and paint this big picture thing, which I feel like, okay, yeah, you should be CTO. And if I have a crazy idea, I go in her office and say, okay, I'm thinking of all this. And she goes, yeah, but that's not practical. That can't be implemented. So I think it is that, right? That the point I'm trying to make is that it's important for each of us also to expand our skill sets besides our own domain as you think about careers and hiring people that have that. And I think seeking women out, by the way, there's always an excuse. Let's say there's not enough women. There's not enough women in, and that's true. But if you find them, if there's 14% graduating class from computer science, I would love all those women to come work at Cisco. So how can we make that happen? I think really making this a passionate agenda is important too for every hiring manager, men and women. All right, and question, a lot of questions. So if you have a mic already, stand up so I can see you. So.
Arianna, earlier you spoke about the importance of standing up for your value. And I'm curious, you as well as Elizabeth and Padma, if you could share a story of when you had to stand up for your value and what was the most challenging part of that experience and how did you overcome it?
So in my case, I had a kind of peculiar career because most of the time I was writing books. Thrive is my 14th book. So most of the time I didn't work in an office. I mean, I worked in a home office. And so my challenges had more to do with wanting to write books that nobody wanted to publish. Like, for example, my second book, after my first book was very successful about the changing role of women, which I wrote at 23, everybody wanted me to keep writing about women, and I really had nothing else to say. I had said, I was 23, and I had said absolutely every last scrap of thing I knew about women. And instead, I wanted to write a book about the crisis in political leadership. And so I locked myself up and wrote a book about that. And then, to my surprise, 36 publishers, one after the other, rejected it. It was a big surprise because I thought this book was going to save Western civilization. And in the meantime, what made it worse, that I'd run out of money. I had spent all the money I had made with a female woman. And so I was kind of depressed, and I remember I was living in London. I was walking down St. James's Street, and I was thinking to myself, maybe I need to give up this dream of being a writer and go take on another job. Instead, I saw a bank, Barclays Bank in the corner, and I walked in, and armed with nothing but a lot of Greek chutzpah, I asked to see the manager, and I asked for a loan. And I had no assets, and for some reason, the manager, whose name was Ian Bell, I still send him a Christmas card every year, gave me the loan. And it not only did it make it possible for me to keep it together for another 5 rejections until I got an acceptance, but also, and more important, it just made me realize that often in life, in our darkest moment, there is help. It's a little bit like in fairy tales, when the hero or the heroine is lost in a dark forest, and suddenly these helpful animals come out to help them find their way out. Well, I really believe that in our lives too, there are helpful animals disguised as human beings, bank managers in my case, who are there to help us. And when we approach life that way, when there is an adversity, whether in a work situation or in a situation like mine, we can tap into our own resilience and deal with it. Because the science is now controvertible, that the same negative events are dealt by people very differently. I mean, there is a study I quote in the book done by the University of Chicago. The Illinois Bell Company fired half its employees in one huge corporate downsizing. And the University of Chicago tracked what happened to them. And 2/3 of them fell apart. They became alcoholics, they became depressed, and 1/3 thrived and went on to bigger jobs, start their own companies. The same set of circumstances provoked very different responses in people. Well, what determines how we respond is how connected we are with our own strength and resilience.
Great. I think for me, it was more work-related. When I was growing through my career, I was the chief technology officer for Motorola's semiconductor business, which was about a $10 billion business at the time. And the company at the time had this program to develop what they called high potential. So they pulled me out of this job and gave me the job of running a company which was created as a subsidiary. And the reason they set that up as a subsidiary is because they thought they had a fundamental breakthrough in the research lab, which if it truly was a breakthrough, would have created roughly $10 billion of value for the company. So I was asked to leave my very successful job to go lead the subsidiary. And the company was investing $200 million to start this subsidiary. Very high profile. Although I was only a VP at the time, I was reporting to the CEO of the big Motorola company. It was sponsored at the CEO level, had visibility to the board. It was sort of like my big step up. And when I took the job, I thought, okay, this is it. All I have to do is do this job really well, and I'm kind of done. I would be very rich and powerful and have this big title. And I was really happy. I was probably 28 years old or something at the time. As I got into this role, and it was actually a really fun role because it was like setting up a startup inside a big company. I could create my own brand, hire all my people. I had blank check, literally. I could recruit from anywhere. We started off, and 3 months into this company creation, we discovered the technology actually wouldn't work. It had a flaw in the way the defectivity was too high for it to be commercially a viable business. I had to really struggle with the decision of what do we do, because the company had made such a big thing out of it. To just say now it doesn't work would be a huge brand damage for the corporation. I had already hired 60 people that they were all high performers from everywhere. I would have to say, you don't have a job anymore. We would have to shut this down. And obviously my career, I thought, basically ended. I really struggled, and going back to how did my values come to it, I was struggling with, okay, I know it doesn't work. But the chief technology officer at the time for the whole corporation, it was his lab that created this technology. I was going up against it. It was a huge political battle. And I was just, like I said, a VP. There was hundreds of VPs in the company. And I had to go to the CEO and the board and prove that this technology doesn't work. So I couldn't sleep. Basically, I was really stressed out. I had no idea who to even tell this to. Obviously, the technical team in my group knew. And they were all looking to me like, OK, what are you going to decide? Right? So it was that moment of truth where people working for me were looking up to me. And they also knew that if I said the truth, we would all be out of jobs. So I called my mentor at the time, who was a retired CEO for the company before, and I said, OK, I'm going to tell you everything. And I kind of went through my whole thing, and I said, I don't know what to do. And, but even if I said the technology doesn't work, all the researchers would argue that it would work. Who's going to believe me? And he said two things to me. He said, you know what to do. You know what to do. Just finish the job. That's all he said. He didn't tell me what I should do. And his point was, no one else can tell you what to do. It's your decision, and you know inherently what you do. I was calling him to make it his decision. I was trying to say, OK, well, Fred said. So I had to go up to the CEO and say, I don't think this is going to work. We have to shut this down. And it was a huge political battle, and we ended up appointing an independent peer group of academicians because it was a big decision for the company. I tell you, I think that was probably the biggest lesson in my career for me. It was, I literally I thought my career was over. I would get fired, and I would have to go find another job. And the opposite happened. I actually got promoted to become CTO for the whole company, because I was able to, and the reason that I was given was I actually prevented a bigger risk later for the company. So I think to me, that was going back to my values and truly being true to, I really couldn't tell people that it would work when it didn't work. I think we're faced with decisions like this all the time, and sometimes we know what the decision is, but we don't want to make it. And I think that was a lesson that I learned is, if you know what the decision is, make the decision. All right, questions from telepresence, from the remote?
We have one question from Boston.
OK, go for it, Boston.
Great. I, too, want to thank the great people up on the panel for this great enlightening session today. I wanted to bring up two subjects that many times can be uncomfortable for all of us. And one of them is actually taking credit for accomplishment. And I think we all know there's a way to do it right that can advance our careers, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, taking credit for great accomplishments. And the other one is in the area of under the subject of knowledge is power. And I would always like to say sharing knowledge and power. But sometimes we feel that having knowledge gives us power. And if I know it and you don't, I might feel in a better strength position. So how can you give us all confidence to take credit for our accomplishments? And how can you make us feel all better, all good, to share the knowledge that we have, and that by doing both, we will advance our career?
This is a great question, because we are seeing an incredible shift when values in business that were seen as female values. Of course, we know that men have female values and women have male values. These are not stereotypes. But there are certain values like collaboration, like sharing knowledge, that are seen as more female, and other values like just completely being competitive, taking credit, not just for what you've done, but for everything that was ever invented under the sun, is seen as more male, right? And right now, the way the world is changing, the way technology is taking over so many functions that before that were done by human beings, means that female qualities like collaboration, like sharing knowledge, like sharing credit, which doesn't mean not taking credit for what you've done, are at a premium. And they're at a premium in in our lives, and in some companies that have already recognized and others that may be recognizing it a little later, but there is no question that's where the world is going. So sharing knowledge also means sharing wisdom. And I think there's an increasing differentiation between data. We're all swimming in data, swimming in information, but actually starved for wisdom. And so I think it's very important to distinguish different ways that we can describe and acquire knowledge. And some of them are more surface and others are deeper. And it's from the deeper ways that we'll get the big creative ideas that are game changers. And for those, very often, we need collaboration.
Anything from you, Elizabeth?
The more and more I see how collaboration and the sharing and the democratization of information and knowledge can really make things, again, more efficient, the more I try to put it into practice every day, even with my colleagues. Being able to get to an end result so much faster when you're not talking in two different languages because somebody is armed with different facts or somebody doesn't want to give you all of the data or info. I think calling it out and then really, really getting to the meat of it, it makes everything happen so much faster and more efficiently.
I think increasingly that's going to become really important, right? I think that was kind of what I was saying about the domain expertise and the example I was giving between Becky and I and how we work together. I think that the things that are important in our work environment in a large technology company is we tend to often be very siloed in our functions, right? Like engineering does this, sales does this, services does this, finance does this, marketing does that. I think occasionally kind of sharing what you know about your domain with someone else who's working in another function can be so useful. And I think actually we find that even with our portfolio companies, we had a showcase last year. We brought 22 of our portfolio companies to Cisco Live so they could actually interact with our customer base. And it was sort of learning from both sides. So I think sharing knowledge is also something that we can do every day. I think just, if you're always finding you're eating lunch with your fellow engineer who sits across in the next cube, or if you're in marketing, you're just hanging out with marketing people, or if you're in biz dev and you're just going out for lunch with corp dev people, maybe pick up the phone and see if someone else in another function, another building wants to go for lunch with you. I think these are things that, you find that sometimes when you do that, you share a lot of cross-pollinate knowledge. And increasingly in our company, we need that. It's really our customers really want us to build solutions, not just deliver products, which means we have to really figure out how we bring this horizontal sharing of knowledge. So it's becoming a business imperative for all of us. So I think it's really, really important. All right. Question there?
The question about the guilt. So we talk about guilt. We all have very demanding job, and sometimes I have the voice inside of my head saying, I should have listened to that crazy idea so we can get things done much faster. At home, sometimes I have little voice saying, I should have read with my son every single day for 1 hour, so I want to see him struggling with reading. All those things. I know it's wrong, but how do we get rid of guilt out of my life?
So,
I can start and Arianna can jump in because I talk about this too. I think it is really giving yourself the permission to be not necessarily meet your own overrated expectations all the time, right? Give yourself permission that, one day I'm going to leave dishes in the sink and it's okay. I'm not going to stress about it. And that's what I stress about. When I come home and I see dirty dishes, I used to freak out. And I would yell at my husband, at my son, he's now 20. I'm like, why can't you clean up after yourself? I walk in his room, I'm like, God, I can't get in. Now I just close the door and I leave. And it's okay, I think, giving ourselves the permission to say there is no perfection. You're never going to be perfect at everything you do. Or being late to a meeting a couple of minutes. Don't be late 2 hours, but it's okay. People understand and they're all actually chatting. But I stress about that. I hate being late to anything else. And I find like I'm hurrying up all the time so I can go from one thing to another thing. And I give my permission for myself to do that. And I encourage your team to be human too. Don't like be a hard ass on your people if they're late or if they say, give them permission to do certain things. I have a rule in my team that if someone's on vacation, if I get emailed, I don't reply to them. And I make sure that I tell, actually, this just happened to somebody who works for me, Hilton, who runs Corp Dev for us. We're always doing deals, so he's always very busy. So he went on vacation. I told his staff, if you get emails from Hilton, don't reply. So I think it's those kind of things, and it's okay, right? It's okay to have 10 days off without being connected all the time. And I told him, if something breaks, I'll call you. You know that. So I think in your case, I think just give yourself permission to be, you don't have to be perfect, meeting this high benchmark that you've set for yourself. That person in your head is setting for you. Don't let that drive you.
The reason I hesitate is because that's been a big issue for me. Guilt and self-judgments have been like the two constants of my obnoxious roommate. So I had to actually work on that part of myself. And I must say that now I've reached the point where that voice only makes guest appearances, which is pretty big for me. But I really agree with everything Padma said. I think a lot of it has to do with our perfectionism, our misplaced perfectionism. And when we realize that perfectionism is not of this world, there will never, for me it was incredibly liberating when I literally woke up one day and realized there will never, ever come a day in my life when I will do everything perfectly. Never. And there will never come a day when everybody else does everything as I want them to do it either. And that was incredibly liberating. Because then just going for excellence is enough. And then a lot of the things that all the mistakes we make, all the things we do wrong every day are part of the human journey. So basically accepting our humanity and being self-compassionate and forgiving is something which then radiates to all others. So for me, it all starts a lot with forgiveness. So one of the things that I learned, literally, at the end of my day, when that voice starts going, you didn't do that right, you were late for that, I didn't like what you said in that speech, or, blah, 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 incidentally, I hope Cisco can discover a way to actually give us a transcript of that voice at the end of the day. Wouldn't that be a great thing to have? Like something we can apply, we can put somewhere here, it can record all these thoughts. Because when you read it at the end of the day, you realize that your worst enemy doesn't talk about you the way you talk about yourself. And what do? Do you kind of divorce yourself? Or it's kind of hard. But if you start with forgiveness, which begins with self-forgiveness, I find that it is, for me, the greatest antidote to guilt. So anytime I judge myself, I forgive myself for judging myself. I literally have this little thing that I say to myself. I forgive myself for judging myself for being late. Or I forgive myself for judging myself for losing my temper. Or whatever it is that I know I shouldn't be doing, but I'm human and I'm a work in progress, then by forgiving myself, what is interesting, then I'm much better at forgiving others. I know that when I didn't forgive myself and judge myself, I would just be upset about everything that other people did wrong. Yeah. Because I was so unkind to myself, I transferred it to others. And we can help each other. I think that's why it's so great. We can actually see our friends or our colleagues do that to themselves, and we can make them laugh about it, which makes it easier to notice it the next time.
And I would add that I've tried to look at life as an ultramarathon, and that comes down to a lot about pacing and then which muscles do you use. And for you, with the feeling, the guilt of work versus reading, pacing, you don't need to do both every day perfectly, but if that turns out to smooth over 5 months, 6 months, 10 years, 2 decades, that's okay. And one of the other things in Ultra is that taught to do is that you walk all of the huge uphills because you're using entirely different muscles than all of the other running muscles. And so as you smooth the life and alleviate some of this guilt, look at it as using different muscles through those different points in life.
Great. All right, we are out of time. I want to thank our guests for joining us today. I also want to thank all of the volunteers that have pulled this event together. I was given a few names, and I know many of these guys: Claire, Irene, Pat, Elena, Karen. They have truly, truly gone outside of their normal day-to-day job, so to speak, to pull all this together. And they were on my case. I can vouch for this every single day till I gave the right amount of time and attention to make this happen. But without their motivation and their inspiration, I wouldn't have done it. So I want to thank them for doing this, and thank you all.